See the screen. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, perfect. Is the screen still visible? Oh, my screen went away. Okay. So hold on. It's going to be back in a moment. Yeah. So here we go. Should be visible now. Okay, perfect. So we'll start. I'll just give you an idea, overview of what we intend to do in the session today. All right. So the plan for the session is we have taken 30 questions to discuss the current events in economics. But I'm sure that all of you guys know that it is not possible to discuss the entire economics current affairs for the year 2022-23 in within these 30 questions. It's not possible to have just a single session to cover this as well. So if your expectation is that you have not studied current affairs throughout the year and this session is going to help you get the current affairs that you require for the exam, unfortunately, that is not going to happen. So there are some key analysis with respect to current events, which is not ready information that is available. So I have taken about 15 odd questions, which are like that. So the current affairs, which are not something that you will directly see in the news, but we have to interpret out of various information that is there. So a lot of times the question that comes is, where do we get the data from? So data-based questions is what is going to be the focus of what we have. Plus, there are a couple of or a few concepts, not a couple of, a few concepts which I have taken up, which there is some relevance to current events. So concepts related to that are included. Plus some other often repeated area or something that, to my understanding, it is something that has been prominent in the news. Also, sometimes which is confusing in nature. Two similar kind of things which creates confusion. So the mechanism that I adopted is, most of you guys have my contact information, the Telegram ID that is there, or my email ID. So if you have been a student of mine, you have that with you. So you guys text me saying, I don't understand the difference between this particular term and this particular term. So based on various questions that have come up, so I have done an analysis of what is a little hard to differentiate between, and if there is some relevance of that sort, that is also a logic which I've used. Right. So this is a series of sessions that we have had. We are done with a few subjects, but you would have already noticed that no two subjects are actually done in a similar way. It is very individually designed according to the subject and the faculty who's taking the particular subject. So that is how this session is also going to be. It is going to be a very specific area that or a set of specific areas that I have picked up. Okay. So we have, as I told you, 30 questions. So each question, I'll display it on the screen. Then I'll give you a timeline of about 45 seconds. Okay. I want you to give me an answer. You can just send the answer to the host, panelist, whatever it is. I'll be able to take a look at the answer as well simultaneously, as and when you send. And then we'll discuss what is the answer, what is the explanation, what is any associated logic that is concerned with it. In addition to that, if you happen to have any doubt with respect to a particular concept, if it is directly related, you can ask me there. I will give you an answer to that as well. With respect to explaining the concept itself, I can do that. If it is something completely unrelated to this, I can take it up at the end of the session. So after we finish 30 questions, maybe we'll dedicate the last 15 minutes or so to answering areas that I have not taken up, especially concepts, more than current affairs, concepts. Okay. If there's anything. So this is the plan that I have. Shall we start with the first question? I'm just checking if you are able to answer me. The question and answering is working properly. So just to know that, shall we start? So that is the question that I'm starting with. Okay. So yes, 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 yes. Good. Getting answers properly, which is perfect. Okay. All right. So we'll start with the first question then. There's a timer which will run on the top. Okay, so first question. You can see a timer running on the top. Once it runs out, I'll stop. You have to send me the answer, A, B, C, D. Choose the right one. Send it across to me. Okay, so sorry, I didn't realize that we ran out of time. Happens. It takes a little bit of time for me to get used to this as well. All right, so I have a series of answers. So I have people who have answered A, I have people who have answered B, I have people who have answered C, I have people who have answered D. If I were to just glance through and look at what is the most common answer, the most common answer seems to be A. Okay. So this is a question which you can very generically answer. Okay. At least one of the statements. So I'm going into the explanation part now. So look at the statement, the tertiary, which of the following statements about the trends in sectoral classification of the Indian economy is or are correct? So trend is what the question is about. It's not 1 year's current affairs, but it's current affairs of the over the last decade, because the question itself is over the last decade. Okay, so look at the first statement there. The tertiary sector has been contributing around half of India's GVA consistently over the last decade. If you have been in my class, towards the end of the first chapter, we do an analysis of the sectoral classification of the economy. How much does primary sector contribute? How much does secondary and how much does tertiary contribute? So this is a question with respect to the generic trend. Okay, and we have seen in class that roughly 50% of India's GDP or GVA is contributed by the service sector. So the remaining 50% is distributed between your primary sector. In fact, 55% is roughly is what we say with respect to the service sector. The remaining 45 is distributed between your secondary sector, which contributes about 25, and the primary sector, which contributes about 20, roughly is what we say. But the question is this: is that data applicable across the last 10 years? And they are not very specific in the first statement, and they are not saying that the tertiary sector has been contributing more than half or anything, around half. So 49% is also around half, 47% is also around half, 55% is also around half. So 45 to 55 is a range that is acceptable for the definition of around half. Okay, so that is the first statement. Okay, the second statement is, this is the tricky statement. Primary sector is the only sector which has recorded consistent positive growth rate of GVA over the last decade, which means that every single year over the last 10 years, the rate of growth should have been greater than zero. In the sense, the rate of growth should have been positive. And this becomes tricky. See, under other circumstances, it would not be tricky. But with a year of COVID in between, where the Indian economy itself went into negative, there was a recession, there was a contraction of GDP, there was a negative GDP growth rate. How realistic is it to imagine that primary sector recorded positive growth? Okay. Now, the answer to that, you can also apply a little bit of logic. When there is a lockdown, you can shut down an industry. When there is a lockdown, you can shut down an IT firm, you can shut down all other tertiary sectors. But when there is a lockdown, can you shut down the farm? Can you say that, okay, the farm sector is going to be shut down? Are you going to tell nature that, okay, don't grow because we are shutting down? That's not likely to happen, right? So one of the bright spots during the COVID itself among the various sectors was that primary sector continued to grow well. In fact, primary sector's contribution, which is usually around 17% of the GDP, grew to around 20% of the GDP during COVID because of a drop in the other sectors. Okay, which means primary continued to do well with respect to the nation's GDP. So the second statement is the dicey statement. The second statement is correct. The first statement is also correct. The answer here is C, both 1 and 2. Now let's look at the data which substantiate this. Okay. So so this is the data which substantiates it. So this is, as you know, I have shown this in class as well. This is the Press Information Bureau, where the National Statistics Organization or National Statistics Office, they publish their data. Okay, when I say this, I don't think you are able to see the screen that I'm sharing. You're still seeing the, okay, data is not visible. Great. So I'll have to, in that case, go to PPT, I think. Yeah, so now I think it should be visible. Or maybe not. Just hold on for a moment. I'll close this. Yeah, I know. I realize. I will share it now. Okay, now it's visible. So this is the usual document that I share in class with respect to Press Information Bureau, their data on the MOSP's data on national income accounting. So they have given an introduction. This is quite an elaborate note. This particular note, if possible, I would suggest you to download this and keep it, because it's a very unique kind of a document, not like the usual documents that we see previously, because the information inside it is very, very limited. The second advance estimate that is given, the document published on 28th February 2023, comparatively recent. Okay, so this particular document is quite long and has a lot of information that we require. Okay, but let's focus on the question at hand right now, and let's try to answer that first. So I'm scrolling down. All the usual information is done. Now we go to this data. Look at the data. It starts from 2011-12 and it has data till 2021-22. It has an at the rate because it is the first revised estimate. Now the question is this. Just take a look at the data. One is sector-wise GVA at current prices. Sector-wise GVA growth rate is what is given. So what matters for us is the first, this in percentage. This is what we are going to look at, not the growth rate. Because if you just remember the question that was asked, the question was, tertiary sector has been contributing around half of India's GVA. So it's not the rate of growth, it is the contribution of that particular sector which we focused on. Okay. So just going, take a look at the data that we have over here. Tertiary sector, 2011. So this is the first one. Okay, so 49%, 50%, 50.6, 51.8, 52.3, 52.6, 52.5, 53.3, 54.8, 52.4, and 52.5. Okay, so this is the data with respect to tertiary sector, which means that tertiary sector over the last decade has indeed been contributing around half of India's GVA, GDP. You can look at it either way. Doesn't make much of a difference. Only the taxation and the subsidies are the difference between them. Still, the data will hold true. Whether it is given as GDP or GVA doesn't matter. Okay, the tertiary sector, which was contributing around 30%, has actually sort of reduced and brought it to around 25%. So roughly 25-26% every year it has been contributing. Primary has been contributing roughly 20% every year. Okay, so this is the data based on which we are going. This is the trend that we need to observe. This is the trend based quizzes, not just 1 year, but across the years. Okay, so this is the source of the data. Once again, let me see if I probably share the screen itself so that, let's see if this works. All right, it becomes easy for me to shuttle. So that is the answer to the first question. Do you guys have any queries with respect to this? Okay, yeah, there is a second question that comes, second part that comes in which I didn't address. I'm sorry about that. Primary sector is the only sector which has recorded consistent positive growth rate of GVA. Okay, so that is something that needs addressing as well. So the data necessary for that is over here. Again, the second set of columns that we have over here. The first one is the sector-wise share in GVA. Is the sector-wise share in GVA. But the second statement is with respect to growth in GVA. Okay, growth in GVA. Now, when it comes to growth in GVA, take a look at it. Primary, secondary, tertiary, all of them are in positive. 2019, we had a recession, or we had a sort of a slowdown in growth or a reduction in growth in secondary. In 2020-21, we had a reduction in growth in both secondary as well as tertiary due to COVID. But if you look at the primary sector throughout from 2012-13 to 2021-22, every year you will find a positive sign. Whether it is 1.2% growth or whether it is 4.8% growth or whatever is the rate of growth, it has been a positive rate of growth that we have had for the last decade. So this is again the interpretation from the data. Just so that there is, or just because there is a minus sign over here, it is something that you should be observing. Whenever you find something unique in a list of data, everything is positive, just one or two are negative. Everything is moving up, something alone is falling down, as you will see subsequently with respect to graphs. Those are worth noting. Service sector, throughout it has been positive, but just 1 year alone, it is showing a negative. And that too, it has been very high positive. So 6, 7, 8% is what it's growing by, and there is a drop to minus 4.2%. So this is of significance then. All right. So that is the second part of the statement. All right, great. So please show the document name again. So what I would suggest is I would just suggest you to type okay, Press Information Bureau. So what I did is I'll just show you the way I searched itself. Just search for GDP PIB. I have typed, and the second advance estimates in the PIB website. Just click on that. You will get to this particular area. So this has all the information with respect to the data. You can find it in the MOSPI website itself, but this is the easier way to access this data. Okay. All right. So there is a request that I should be sharing the PPT with respect to this. PPT is just the questions. None of this is PPT. I am just sharing the screen from my laptop. If you look at it, it's a browser that I'm sharing. Okay. Let's see. I'll try to share a PDF. I'll tag it somewhere and try to share it with you guys. PDF of the PPT that we have, but there is nothing in the PPT as such. I don't see. Don't assume that these are questions that are going to be asked as it is in the UPSC exam. The questions are not the focus here. The information that we take out of is what is the focus over here. So don't get too attached to these questions and think that this is going to appear as it is. I don't have that level of knowledge to predict what is the UPSC question going to be. Nowhere close to being close to making such cases. Anyway, moving to the second question, which is again a continuation, Indian economy trends. So we are starting the timer now. Looking for answers. Okay, so again, sorry, time ran out. I didn't realize. Anyway, so the overwhelming answer, I was looking at the answer. That's why I was not able to. I have the answer on the side in a different device. I'm looking at the chat box over there. So that's the reason why I keep losing track of the fact that time has run out. Anyway, so the overwhelming answer seems to be D, 1 and 2. There's one statement which you can reasonably eliminate. The third statement, which says for the first time in a decade, exports outperformed imports, which means exports is greater than imports. If that does happen, just know that it will be all over the news. There is no way that you will miss such a news. Have you seen a news like that? That exports have outperformed imports? You don't even have to think, have I seen it in some remote corner? No, it will definitely be there as a big thing in the news if it happens. It hasn't happened. So you would not have seen it in the news. So third is wrong. Okay, the moment 3 is wrong, you eliminate C. Now the question is it A, is it B, is it D? Which is why most people went for a D. Seems like correct. The answer is actually A. The first statement. Quite a few people have answered the correct one as well, have given me the correct answer as well. So once again, we go to the same document for the data that we require. So the data is in a different part of this document. Okay. So this is 1 year. It is not over a decade or anything. It is just 1 year's data. We will take a look at the current price data. Okay. Okay. So what is the question about? Now, if you know the aggregate demand formula, so I am not able to zoom it any further for some reason. So I'm able to zoom out really, really small, but it is not zooming in, sadly. Okay. So again, the same data, if you want, you can access it in your device, but I can point it out to you. Let me just see if there is an option for me to zoom it from here. Yeah. So it's not very frequently that my technical skills work. Accidentally, it happened to work now. So good for me. So the question, once again, let's go back to the question. The question states, household consumption expenditure contributes more than half of India's GDP. So the moment you see the word expenditure and in the context of GDP, you have to think in your mind the expenditure method of calculating GDP, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. C is the household consumption expenditure, I is the investment expenditure, and X minus M is what is the third statement about it. G is the only thing which we have not asked over here. Okay, so C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Look at the examples that we have used in class. The examples that we have used in class says in the example on the circular flow of income that we discussed in class, the first thing that I use is 60% is household consumption expenditure, 30% is investment expenditure. Then the remaining 10% goes towards government. And then we have exports and imports that come in. And maybe I have mentioned, maybe I have not mentioned, but that is representative of what is the reality in the economy as well. Take a look at this data. This is the share in GDP, private final consumption expenditure, as we see over here. Okay, I'm not able to choose parts of it, but share in GDP, the column that is highlighted here, you will find a number 57.2, 58.3, 58.5. That is what is C. The one next to it, government final consumption expenditure, roughly 10, that is G, C plus G. Then the gross fixed capital formation plus change in stock plus valuables, which technically is referred to as gross capital formation, or more commonly referred to as investment. It contributes roughly around 35%, roughly, because there is exports and imports also, or 30% is something that you can assume it as. Okay, you can't expect a perfect 100 as such. It will eventually appear, but there are discrepancies as well. And exports, you will notice that exports are lesser, imports are greater. It has been the case as a percentage of GDP, or in absolute terms also. You can take a look at the previous one, the table that is given above. But the question is with respect to percentages. So this is the source of the information based on which the question is set. Okay, going back to the question, household consumption expenditure contributes more than half of India's GDP. It contributes roughly around 60% of India's GDP. And you don't need to know all of this. You can simply go by the common statements that here you hear India is a consumption-oriented economy. You go back to the previous question, you hear India is a service sector oriented economy. Tertiary sector contributes around half of India's GDP. Consistently over the decade or not is a different thing. That's a general statement that we know. This is also a general statement that we know. Okay, what is a general statement that we know? India is a consumption-oriented economy. So more than half of India's GDP is contributed by household consumption. Correct. Investment expenditure contributes less than a quarter. Less than a quarter means less than 25%. That is not true. It contributes more than 30% of India's GDP. Okay. So always try to remember data in round numbers. 50% greater, lesser, 25% greater than, greater, lesser, 1/3, 1/4. Try to remember the data with respect to some. You come across a data of 28% somewhere. Very hard to remember that 28%. Just remember it as 1/4, greater than 1/4, around 1/4. Some way to remember it. Okay. So that is what you should be looking at doing. So the answer here is A, one only. Any queries? Let me know if I can proceed to the next one. Okay. Not seeing any response. So I think everyone is waiting for someone else to respond. Moving on then, I'll respond. Okay, so this is the next one. Time starts. Okay, we have run out of time. For a change, I noticed it. Okay, so I think a lot of people have given me the correct answer. The correct answer here is A, 1 and 2 only. So it's good. You're familiar with this particular index. The reason why I picked this particular index is it's an index which extends from the first chapter about production, whether production is likely to happen or not. So it is a growth-oriented indicator or index that is there, not something that we discuss in class. So I thought we'd pick it up so that we can familiarize ourselves with it. First question, who publishes it? There is not a standard one. Globally, there's a global index, but calculated regionally in every country. There are multiple organizations which are involved in it. There is an organization called as INS Market Tool. There is S&P Global. There are such different organizations. So in India's case, if I'm not wrong, it is INS Market Tool. So that is the organization that is involved. You also find S&P Global that is mentioned over there. So the first statement, let's take a look at it one by one. It is an indicator of business activity, both in the manufacturing and service sectors. So there are three types of purchasing managers index which are actually published. There is a separate purchasing managers index published for the manufacturing sector, manufacturing PMI. There is a separate purchasing managers index published for the service sector, services PMI. And then through a mathematical combination, these two are brought together, and a composite purchasing managers index for the entire production is also published, which means it is an indicator of business activity for both manufacturing as well as service sector. The question doesn't specifically say manufacturing PMI. It just generally says PMI. So the first statement is correct. The second statement, PMI is calculated based on sub-indices such as new orders, output, employment, suppliers' delivery time, stocks of items purchased. These are some of the indices that are there. Because we have separate purchasing managers index for manufacturing and services and a composite one, we cannot say specifically these are the exact sub-indices that are there. These are some of the sub-indices which are used. It is correct. It is a very generic kind of a statement. There is nothing obviously wrong about it, so you will have to naturally assume it to be right. Okay, I'm just giving you a logic there. So how exactly does this calculation work? Look at the name of the index. It says Purchasing Managers Index, which means when the survey is conducted, they go to the purchasing managers in these organizations in various manufacturing and service sectors, and they go and ask specific questions. as to how much of new orders are they placing in the upcoming period. It's a monthly index, it's published every month. So in the upcoming month, how many new orders are you placing? Okay, what is the target output that you have? How many people are you employing in the upcoming period? So all these are the information that is quantitatively gathered from the purchasing managers, and they are also asked for their subjective opinion as to what they believe is going to be the situation in the next 1 month in their industry, not in the global economy as such, in their industry. So their opinion is also something that they provide. So all of this is brought together, weightages are provided for it, and finally an index is released, where if you get a score of 50, 1 month it's 50, next month it is 50, it means that there is no growth or there is no contraction that is going to happen. If the number is greater than 50, it indicates an expansion in the business activity. If the number falls below 50, it is an indication of contraction. That is what is the error in the third statement. A figure of above 50 denotes a contraction in business activity. That's wrong. A figure above 50 denotes an expansion in the business activity. One below 50 indicates a contraction. 50 exactly as it is means that there is no expectation of change that is going to happen. So the answer is A, 1 and 2. 1 and 2 only. So let's take a look at the next question. If you do have any questions, immediately send it across. So I will take a look at it and address. Okay, great. Moving on. Time is running. Okay, time ran out. Sorry. Again, lost it. All right. Skipped. One person who said skipped. Okay, fair enough. At least you're honest with it. Nothing to lose, but still no random guesses. That's good preparation for UPSC. Anyway, so the next 5 questions, including this one and the next 4 questions are going to be an analysis of the budget. Okay. So what are the trends that are observed in the budget? Decadal probably. Decadal is there, plus yearly is also there. So this was in the news a lot. Last year also it was in the news. This year also it is in the news, because the government has been proclaiming, or not just proclaiming, they have made it very obvious that capital expenditure has been significantly increased in the budget, overall budget estimates that are provided. There is a significant increase in capital expenditure compared to previous periods. There is no doubt about it. But the question is only about what is the extent of the increase. Now, I personally don't expect a question or a statement like the first one, where it says 37% and all those things. That is not the UPSC style of questioning. So they might replace it with, say, roughly 1/3, or whatever is the number that whatever is the way that they want to represent the data, or they may not go for data itself. But this is something that you should be knowing, because look at, this is the budget document. All I have done is, there is a document called as budget at a glance. You're all familiar with the budget, the government's budget website, Indian budget. Just type Indian budget. You will go to this website. You can download this document called as budget at a glance. Look for the full document. There is a document called as budget at a glance full, complete document. It's about 26 pages. Just take a look at that. In the first page of the document itself, they have highlighted, or the second page, they have highlighted this particular information. Okay. So what is the information that they are trying to convey? The total expenditure in the budget estimate for the upcoming year is estimated at 45 lakh crore, of which total capital expenditure is 10 lakh crore. You have already got the answer to the second statement in this. Total expenditure is 45 lakh crore. Capital expenditure is 10 lakh crore. What is going to be the remaining 35 lakh crore? The remaining 35 lakh crore is going to be revenue expenditure, because total expenditure is equal to capital plus revenue plus capital. Capital is only going to be 10, which means the remaining 35 is revenue. The second statement is capital has out or capital expenditure is greater than revenue expenditure. Clearly not true. Now let's look at the following part. Budget of the upcoming year reflects, or in our case, the present year, reflects continuing strong commitment of the union government to boost economic growth by investing in infrastructure development, leading to an increase in capital expenditure of by 37.4% over the revised estimates of 2022-23. Okay, then they have mentioned something called as effective capital expenditure. I'll explain what is effective capital expenditure to you, but this particular paragraph itself conveys to us what is the attempt at conveying the information that is to be conveyed over here. I will run through the budget document entirely after the 5 questions are over, because if I scroll down, I have a feeling that maybe I'll give you the answer to one upcoming question, one or two upcoming questions that are there. So I'm refraining from doing that. We'll take it question by question. So this is the data based on which this particular question is given. What is the difference between budget estimate and revised estimate? I will give you an answer to that as well. Okay, just give me one moment. I will, let's get back to the question and then we'll take it up. Okay, so the statement here is capital expenditure and budget estimate 2023-24 is roughly 37% more than revised estimate. That's correct. Capex in budget for the first time is greater than revenue expenditure, nowhere close. Okay, so 43 lakh crore, of which 10 lakh crore or 45 lakh crore, of which 10 lakh crore is capital. The remaining 35 is still revenue. Revenue still is a huge component of the overall expenditures. So second statement is wrong. The first statement is correct. Okay, again, when you have statements like for the first time it is greater, it should have been there prominently in the news. If you have read the day's news on the days after the publication of the budget or the announcement of presentation of the budget, you should have come across it if you have actively read the news. Okay, so the answer here is A, one only. Okay, moving on to the next question, the fifth question. Time starts. All right, so time has run out. I am still getting varied kind of answers. There are two trickeries in this, two things to observe for in this. First thing to observe is arrange the above in the order of increasing value of deficits, which means the first deficit should be the least deficit. The last deficit should be the highest deficit. You can apply simple logic to eliminate a couple of options. What is the simple logic? Of all deficits, fiscal deficit is going to be the highest deficit without a doubt. Fiscal deficit means total money which the government will have to borrow. That is how much is the total shortfall for the government. That is the maximum deficit. Why do I say so? Because that is the deficit for the entire budget itself. When it comes to revenue deficit, that is deficit only for one part of the budget, which logically has to be lesser than fiscal deficit. Okay. If you look at the formula for primary deficit itself, it says fiscal deficit minus interest payments, which means this primary deficit is going to be definitely lesser than fiscal deficit, and effective revenue deficit is equal to revenue deficit minus grants for creation of capital assets, which means effective revenue deficit has to be lesser than revenue deficit. If this is the case, then fiscal deficit is going to be the highest value, which means in our options, that should be the last one. If that is the last one, option A is ruled out, option D is ruled out. So two options are ruled out right away. Okay. So these are certain logics that you have to know. So if you are going to choose between B and C, then then you don't have to worry about revenue deficit, because in both B and C, 3-1-3-1, that is the last two, which means the highest is fiscal deficit, the second highest is revenue deficit. Okay. Now the question is primary deficit in second place, or is primary deficit is the least deficit, or is effective revenue deficit the least deficit? This is the only question that needs to be answered. This is not easy. This is not easy at all. Only if you know, you will be able to answer. Why do I say so? Because of a data that I'm going to show right now to you. Okay, I am looking for this particular graph. Okay, so what does this graph say? This graph says the darker line which is on top, that is a fiscal deficit. Clearly, fiscal deficit is greater. Logically, it has to be greater. Fiscal deficit is a percentage of GDP. Fiscal deficit in absolute terms, it won't matter. It will still be the same, because everything is a percentage of GDP, which means that in absolute terms also, the pattern will hold true. Okay, followed by it comes revenue deficit in the reverse order is what I'm saying. If you notice carefully, till 2021-22, effective revenue deficit was in that reverse order in third place, which means the second highest deficit, and primary deficit was the least deficit. Sorry, second lowest deficit was effective revenue deficit, and primary deficit was the least deficit that our budget had, that was there as per the budget. But you will notice that from 2021-22, there has been a change in trend, and the green line has come down. The whatever is the other color that is there, that line has actually gone up, which means that effective revenue deficit since 2021-22 is the least deficit that is there. Okay, the ideal value of effective revenue deficit is actually 0, because look at the formula. Effective revenue deficit is equal to revenue deficit minus grants used for asset creation. Ideal situation, the entire revenue deficit should be used for asset creation, should be in the form of grants used for asset creation, which means if we have a revenue deficit, the entire money is used indirectly but productively. Okay, it becomes an effective capital expenditure. Okay, now in that case, it is a good trend to notice that effective revenue deficit is going down, because effective revenue deficit should ideally be 0. When it comes to primary deficit is equal to fiscal deficit minus interest payments, which means if primary deficit is equal to 0, it is a bad situation to be in, because when will it be 0? When the fiscal deficit and interest payments are equal, which means every single money that is borrowed is being used for paying interest itself, which means primary deficit being 0 is a bad situation to be in. Okay, so in a way, you can say, in terms of arranging it in terms of logic, this is a better scenario that we are in. It's an observation of something which can be interpreted as positive. You can't make such judgments just because there is a change in positioning, but I'm trying to explain the logic that is associated. Okay, so this is what you take away if you see a graph like this. Now, what is observable here? If, let's say, all the graphs throughout the journey has been in the way where fiscal is highest, revenue is next, effective revenue is next, primary is next, there is nothing to observe. But in 2021-22, there has been a change in trend. It is worth observing. It is worth making a note. Okay, so this is the concept that is there. Now comes another part which I told you earlier. I told you I'll answer it. What has been the effective capital expenditure? So there is this component called as which based on which your effective revenue deficit concept itself works. Effective revenue deficit is what? Revenue deficit minus grants used for asset creation. Similarly, effective capital expenditure is equal to capital expenditure plus grants used for asset creation, because effectively those grants are being used as capital expenditure, though not by the union government. The union government is ensuring that that fund is used for capital expenditure purposes. So that is what is called as effective capital expenditure. We came across that earlier in the introduction which I showed you in this paragraph. Towards the end, you will notice that this part, effective capital expenditure at 13,70,949 shows an increase of 30.1% over the revenue expenditure. Okay. So that 30 point, more than the 30.1, the point is the government is trying to convey a concept called as effective capital expenditure. You may come across that concept as well, effective capital expenditure. Okay. All right. Moving on then. I still haven't answered one of the questions which was asked earlier about what is the difference between RE and BE. I will take it up after the series of questions on the budget is over, okay? Because I don't want to show any question without intention. Yeah, so I noticed that. I noticed your question earlier itself. Okay, so once more about effective capital expenditure. Yes, effective capital expenditure is nothing but capital expenditure plus grants for asset creation. If you remember the formula for effective revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit is equal to revenue deficit minus grants for asset creation, right? That same terminology, because you're subtracting it from revenue expenditure, you need to add it somewhere, right? So you're adding it as part of capital expenditure, and the government is claiming it to be effective capital expenditure because that grant is used for asset creation. So effective capital expenditure is that. Effective revenue deficit, effective capital expenditure. Okay. This year, all deficits are showing grants used for state assets. Mithilesh, it is not explicitly said that it is for state asset creation, but it is simply said grants used for asset creation. The government classifies it that way. Effective capital, I'll repeat, effective capital expenditure is equal to capital expenditure plus grants used for asset creation. Grants are usually part of revenue, or grants are always part of revenue expenditure. There is no doubt about it. But there is a component of revenue expenditure which is indirectly resulting in asset creation. And the central government is ensuring that asset is getting created as a result of those grants. Because it is a conditional expenditure. The central government gives it to the states and says, you must use it for creating assets. Otherwise, we'll take the money back from you. Which means central government is ensuring that assets are getting created for the money that is being provided. All right. So that is why it is called as effective capital expenditure. I repeat, effective capital expenditure is equal to capital expenditure, the usual capital expenditure, plus grants provided for creating assets, grants for asset creation. Okay, great. Moving on to the next question. Time starts. We're out of time. Let's take a look at the answers. Okay. Okay, the previous one, I think I didn't give the answer. The previous one, the answer was B, 4231. Okay, 4231. Now coming to this one. Okay, so market borrowings contribute the most towards total borrowings. So what are market borrowings? Borrowings of the government in the form of GSEC, in the form of T-bills, in the form of everything else that conventionally that they borrow within India. So that is market borrowing. Okay. So what else is there other than market borrowing? The government borrows from RBI in the form of ways and means advances. The government borrows from your state governments in the form of treasury bills. Then the government borrows from say your small savings fund and all those things. Those are outside of market borrowings. Okay, market borrowings contribute the most towards total borrowing. Without a doubt, you should be knowing that this is to be true. So that is correct. Then external borrowing contribute more than 1/4 of the total borrowings. We have discussed this in class that external borrowing is not a major contributor to India's borrowing. India's advantage, you could say, with respect to borrowings is that most of our liabilities are internal in nature. So the second statement is wrong. The first statement, one only, is correct. So let's take a look at the data to substantiate this. So this is the data. Okay. Sources of financing fiscal deficit. So what is meant by market borrowing? Market borrowing refers to, look at the number 2 over here, market borrowing. Vijayashree, you can take a look at it now. This is what I'm explaining. The first point, market borrowings is GSEC plus T-bills. GSEC plus T-bills. Okay. So this is market borrowing. The total debt receipts in the budget estimates is this much. So roughly 18 lakh crore. Roughly 18 lakh crore. Of 18 lakh crore, 12 crore or 12.3 lakh crore is in the form of market borrowings, which is close to 70%. Close to, because assume it to be 18 lakh and 12 lakh. 12 lakh out of 18 lakh is 2/3, right? So 2/3 is 66.5%. So roughly 70% of the total borrowing that the government does is in the form of market borrowings. Okay. In terms of borrowing, that is a major source. Look at external debt. It is not even in lakhs. It is 22,000 crore, which is actually roughly only 1%, 1.2% or something like that. So that is all that the government is borrowing from external sources. What did the question say? The question said 1/4. What did the question say? The question said external borrowings contribute more than 1/4. More than 1/4 means 25%. This is nowhere close to 24%. It's only around 1% that is the borrowing from external sources. So this is the data to be observed. What else are the other sources? Securities against small savings. So there is a lot of small savings that people deposit in post office funds and all those things, right? So those are what are called as small savings. So how does the government, how is interest provided on that? The government, so people put it in the small savings account. The government issues securities to them, to those organizations like post office and all those things, and the government borrows money from there, not directly from the public, not from the market, but from the small savings organizations, post office deposits and all those things. That is the second biggest source of borrowing. Then you have other receipts, which is internal debt, from other organizations, government-owned organizations itself, any internal borrowing that comes in, or borrowing from the public account of India, all of that contributes around 5,42,000. State Provident Fund money is a very, comparatively, again, a very small percentage, less than the external debt. Okay. All right. So it's a very interesting question. When did my math skills improve? What can I say? A little bit of preparation probably helped. I'm still not sure my math skills have improved. So you don't know how much of calculation goes on in my mind before I actually utter something. Thank you for that. Anyway, I think I'll have a sleepless night tonight because someone appreciated my math skills. Anyway, moving on. So that is the source of this particular question. That is the area from which we asked the question. So one only is the correct answer. The second one is wrong. Okay. Moving on to the next question. I think two more questions from budget. We start. Time starts. All right. So we ran out of time. Okay, so what is the answer here? Net tax revenue accounts for less than half of the total receipts. Debt receipts account for around 40% of the total receipts. Which of the statements are correct? Let's take a look at the data. Okay, so there are some round things that you will see. This is rupee goes to, this is expenditure. This is the receipt part. So rupee comes from, which means where is the money coming from? They have given a compilation over here. Data is not exactly the precise one that we want, but take a look at it. Corporation tax contributes 15% of the overall receipts of the government, including capital and revenue, both of them, because you will find borrowings also as a part of the same thing. Rupee comes from overall in the budget. So this is revenue receipt plus capital receipt. Okay, so corporation tax 15%, income tax 15%, roughly is what they are saying. Okay, customs duty 4%, union excise duty 7%, goods and services tax 17%. Take a look at, add all of them up, 30, 34 plus 7. Okay, I think, yeah, 41. Thank you. 41, 48, 58. So roughly 60%. Thank you, Rajashri Mohan. I was looking for someone to help me out with respect to the addition. But yeah, 58% is contributed by purely tax receipts. But please note, this is gross tax receipts, not the net tax receipts. The question is about net tax receipts. But even if it comes to net tax receipts, what is the difference between gross and net tax receipts? Out of the gross, some amount of money, although the center collects it, it has to give it to the state. It collects it on behalf of the state. I'm not talking about the devolution of funds. Certain taxes like IGST, half of IGST belongs to the states, right? So that part has to go towards the states. So even when it comes to net tax revenue, it is still more than 50%. That is why the first statement is correct. When that happens, borrowings and liabilities become close to 40%, because that is what the statement says, right? It is not here. It says borrowings and liabilities are 34%, and the statement says roughly account for 40% of the total receipts. So just to take a look at that data, let's go to some numbers. Okay, yeah, so here it is. Of the total receipts of 45 lakh crore, which is given over here, 45 lakh crore. Okay, so 23 lakh crore is in the form of net tax receipts, which is greater than 50%. Okay, 46 lakh, half of it is 23. So 45 more than 23 is there, which means more than half is in the form of tax receipts. Borrowings and other liabilities are roughly 18 lakh crore, which is again around that roughly 40% mark. So that is why the data given there is right. Okay, so the reason why this data is important is because look at it, 50% is contributed by tax revenue receipts, 40% is contributed by borrowing, DCR. Look at the components of receipts. There is tax revenue receipts, non-tax revenue receipts, non-debt capital receipts, and debt capital receipts, where tax revenue receipts and DCR itself contributes 90% of the total receipts of the government, which means your non-tax revenue receipts and non-debt capital receipts are a very negligible part of the overall money that the government receives. Okay, cumulatively it accounts for only 10%. That is an important observation, that tax and borrowing contributes 90% of the government's receipts. So that is a very important, cumulatively, roughly 90% of the receipts, more than 90% actually. Okay, so it shows the comparative insignificance of non-tax revenue receipts and non-debt capital receipts. Comparative. I'm not saying it's insignificant, but in the context of the other receipts, it loses its significance. Okay, so that is the basis of the question that we had. The answer here is the first statement is wrong. The second statement is correct. B2 only is the answer. Moving to the next question. Time starts. Almost run out of time. Yeah. So we have run out of time. What's the answer? Let me take a look at the choices that have been given. It's a bit of a tricky question to guess. Okay, so let me see if there's anyone who has given the correct answer. Not initially. Okay, so there is Vignesh Babu, Rospin Vignesh Babu. One person. What? Only one person has given the correct answer? Okay. Okay, fine. Finally, someone else too. Kirutik. Okay, fine. So the answer here is C. 2 and 3 are the correct statements. 2 and 3. C is the correct answer. So let's again. Okay, after I gave answer, I'm getting an answer saying C, which is very interesting. I didn't know you could do that. Okay, anyway. Consider the following statements about the trends of tax receipts over the last decade based on the Union budget of 2023-24. Last decade based on the latest data. Tax to GDP ratio has been consistently increasing. What is this concept of tax to GDP ratio? Are you familiar with the concept called as tax buoyancy? There is a term called as tax buoyancy, which is nothing but increase in the rate, increase in tax revenue, percentage increase in tax revenue as a proportion of percentage increase in GDP. Tax revenue growth rate divided by GDP growth rate. Okay, so that is what is called as tax buoyancy. In a system where taxation is buoyant means floating, doing well, the tax revenue grows by a greater extent than the GDP itself grows. So that is tax buoyancy. That is what is tax to GDP ratio. Let's take a look at the data. Okay, let's also take a look at the other two statements. Net tax receipts have been greater. Direct tax receipts have been greater than indirect tax receipts during most years. It's a very generic statement, during most years. Okay, and center's net tax revenue has been consistently increasing. So 2 words to focus in the first statement, 1 or 3 words to focus in the first statement. Tax to GDP ratio has been consistently increasing. So there are 2 things that you could be asked in the exam. Over the last decade, tax to GDP ratio has increased. If they have simply said tax to GDP ratio has increased over the last decade, it means that 10 years ago versus today. If today the value is greater than what was 10 years ago, then you can say it has increased over the decade. But it says consistently increasing, which means not only should it be greater now when compared to 10 years ago, every intervening year should have had an increasing trend. Every year, first year, second year should be greater, third year should be greater, fourth should be greater, 10th year should be greater than 9th year, and so on. Okay. So that is consistently increasing. In the third statement also, you will find consistently increasing. So that's a very important information. Usually in UPSC exams, when you come across the term consistently increasing, the likelihood of such a statement being correct is very, very low. Because something, an economic information being consistently high, the chances are very low, except if you are talking about absolute numbers. Absolute numbers are likely to increase because take government's borrowing. Fiscal deficit, although as a percentage of GDP, it may decrease from one year to another because the GDP is increasing, the actual amount borrowed itself is going to increase, is most likely going to increase. Although fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP may have decreased. So if the question is about fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP or growth rate or something like that, the chances of consistent increase are less. So the first statement being correct is less likely, whereas the third statement is not about growth rate. It's not about percentage. It's an absolute value. Center's net tax revenue, amount of money, has been consistently increasing. The chances of such a statement being correct are quite high. And the next important word to focus is direct tax receipts have been greater than indirect tax receipts during most years. It means every single year over the last decade, it doesn't matter what has happened. More than 5 years over the decade, over the last decade, if it's greater than direct tax is greater than indirect tax, that's good enough. Most means majority, more than half. That is all that is necessary. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the data now. All right. So before I answer this, there's a question about I have doubts regarding subject. How can I communicate? I couldn't contact through Telegram. So don't ask me these sort of questions during the session that is happening. Ask me at the end of it. When I ask you, is there something else? Make a note of it and ask me later. The reason I say so is because I will miss your chat. Even if I've read it, I'll forget it by the time we come back, because all the people are answering over here, 100 answers per question. It means that your query will get lost. So keep this aside and ask me this in the end when I ask you if you have any further questions. We'll find a way. I don't know what is the solution, but we'll find a solution. Okay, so tax to GDP ratio. Let's scroll down. I think this is the last question from budget, so I can freely show you the entire graph. Okay, this is deficit trends. I think it's on. No, I'm sorry. I will take a look at the data. Here it is. Okay. Trends in tax receipts. Okay, this is a percentage of GDP. This is what is called as tax to GDP ratio. Because look at what is given over here. Tax receipts as a percentage of GDP. Tax to GDP ratio. How much is the tax to GDP ratio is given over here? Roughly around 10%. Tax to GDP ratio. We know that already. Remember, in the government expenditure part, you remember your consumption expenditure is 60%, investment expenditure is 30%, 10% is in the form of government expenditure. So if the government has to spend, they have to get money in the form of taxes, right? So only through taxes they'll be able to spend. So how much should be the tax as a percentage of GDP? Roughly around 10%. That will hold true. But the question is, has it been increasing? Take a look at the red line. Is it a straight upward moving line? No. It is not a straight upward moving line. It is moving in all directions. 10.1, 10, 10.6, 11.2, 11.2, 10.9, 9.8, 10.3. It is moving all over the place. As a percentage, the likelihood of a consistent change is very, very low. Okay, so the first statement is negated. First statement is wrong. What was the second statement? The second statement said direct tax receipts have been greater than indirect tax receipts during most years. Now, this data is not about the direct tax receipts itself, it's as a percentage of GDP, but because it's both as a percentage of GDP, we can take a look at this data itself and we can comment. I will show you the other data also. So in let's say 2013-14, 5.6, 4.4. Direct tax, the yellow one is the direct tax. Direct tax is greater. Next year, 5.2, 4.4, greater. 2015, 5.4, 5.2, greater. But 2016, 5.6, 5.5, which means indirect tax is greater than direct tax. There is 1 year where indirect tax is greater than direct tax. Then it comes back to normalcy. 2017, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20 is normal. 2021 again. Direct tax is 4.8, indirect tax is 5.5% in terms of percentage of GDP, which is applicable throughout also. Then once again, normalcy is restored. 2021-22, 6, 5.4, 5.5, or 6, 5.1, 6, 5.1. But 8 out of 10 years, direct tax is greater than indirect tax. The statement says direct tax receipts have been greater than indirect tax receipts during most years. Statement is correct. 8 out of 10 is most. There is no question about it. Okay. So you can also take a look at absolute numbers here. Rupees in lakh crore. Okay. How much is the lakh crore? You will notice that okay, this is just direct tax. They have not split it as direct and indirect. Okay, total tax. So third statement, center's net tax revenue has been consistently increasing. Look at the blue with every passing year. Is there any year where the blue is lesser than the previous year? No. 8.2 lakh, 9 lakh, 9.4 lakh, 11 lakh, 12.4 lakh, 13.2, 13.6, 14.3, 18.19, 20, 23. Every year in absolute terms, it has been increasing. As a percentage of GDP, it would not consistently increase. But the question is not as a percentage of GDP. The question is in absolute terms. Net centers tax revenue has been consistently increasing. Correct. Okay. So that is how we can look at it. But take a look at the other receipts also. Other than borrowing, everything they have given. Non-tax revenue, there is no consistent increase. 2, 2.5, 2.7, 1.9, 2.4, 3.3, 2.1. It is varying. Look at non-debt capital receipts, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 1.2, but then 1.1, 0.7, 0.6. So it keeps varying. Okay, so there is no consistent trend. But with tax revenue receipts, there is a consistent trend that is there. Again, something to be observed. So when you come across data like this is what you need to observe. Patterns, trends are what you have to observe. All right. Okay. So now I will take up any question that you have with respect to budget document, because I finished all the questions that is there with respect to budget document. So there's a question which Arun is asking. Nowadays, GST revenue have been increasing. How can I infer it, sir? So GST, I mean, with respect to direct tax revenues higher than indirect taxes. Yeah, so I don't understand the connection that you're trying to ask, Arun. Can you make some connection and ask me that question? Rephrase that question. Very open-ended what you're saying. What will be the correct statement for the first option? First option, what will be the correct statement? Tax to GDP ratio has been consistently increasing. You can't say it. So it does not, that is wrong itself. What do you mean? How can we put it into a correct statement? Tax to GDP ratio has been growing inconsistently over the last decade. That's probably correct if you want it to be. Kirti, that document I don't need to share. Government shared it with me. The government has shared it with you also. Everyone can access the document. Okay, just go to, okay, I'll show you what I do. So let's take Pro. Okay. I'll just okay. You're able to see what I'm doing, right? Okay. So what am I doing? I'm simply typing okay. Indian budget. Indian budget. What's the first website that I get? Indian budget. indiabudget.gov.in. Open. I'm teaching you how to download a document. Okay, budget at a glance. You'll notice right in the center, budget at a glance. Budget at a glance full. That's it. Download the document. This is the document that we have been referring to. Okay, I hope that helps. This is the same place from which you can download the economic survey as well, if you want. So economic survey, you can either go click over this over here. There is a field here, gray, or you can just simply type economic survey. It will take you to the exact economic survey. It will take you to this page where you can download the chapters. You can download a list of tables and charts, statistical appendix, everything that you require. You have it over here. Okay. All right. Moving on to the budget document itself. I have a few queries. I'll answer it one by one. Will a boiled egg come under GST? Because once it was asked in a test series, I don't know. I don't have that information ready with me. Sorry. Okay. Arun, I'm just wondering if you have rephrased. Yes, you have rephrased the question. I'm taking a look at it. In that question, second option is mentioned about direct tax revenues higher than indirect tax revenue. Nowadays, GST revenue has been increasing. Okay. So GST revenue has been increasing without doubt. That's the case. But if you have been noticing the news, your income tax revenue has also been increasing. Corporate tax revenue has also been increasing. Okay. It has been the case. Now, how do we know that? So there is a table here. I'm just checking if what I'm showing is visible. Yes, what I'm showing is visible. Arun, so take a look at this. Look at the trends that are witnessed over here. Corporation tax. Look at the trend. So this is the estimates. Taxes on income, which is taxes on income other than corporate tax. So it is also showing an increasing trend. GST is showing an increasing trend. All of these are showing an increasing trend. Okay. So that answers your question. So GST has been increasing, but why is GST making so much of a news? Because GST was recently introduced. When I say recently, 2017, 5-6 years ago, it was introduced, but in the larger scheme of things, it is still a new concept. We still haven't completely stabilized with respect to GST. There are still states claiming that give us support, give us compensation, because we are getting used to the new system. Okay, which is why GST is frequently in the news, not because it has overtaken corporate tax or other sources of taxes of India. I hope that answers your question, Arun. Okay, so let me take a look at some other. Yeah, I will. I'll come to it. That's the next thing that I want to discuss. RE versus BE. So it is here itself. Take a look at it. Rospin Vignesh Babu. I don't know. That's your name. Okay. So every year when the government announces the budget, okay, this is very basic information. Every year when the government announces the budget, the government says what is going to be the expenditure pattern on February 1, 2023, few months ago, when the government announced the budget. Their main budget that they announce is for what is going to happen in the upcoming year, what is going to be the taxes, how much is going to be the borrowing. So that is for the financial year starting from April 1, 2023, which will go till March 31, 2024. That is what is called as budget estimates. You will notice that the government announced a very similar budget estimate for 2022-23 1 year ago. On February 1, 2023, the government had announced a budget estimate, 2022, February 1, 2022, the government had announced a budget estimate for 22-23 on February 1, 2022 for the upcoming year. That is budget estimate. So this is budget estimate from 1 year ago. This is budget estimate at present. Okay. This is budget estimate at present. Okay. Now, coming to what is revised estimate. Now, when the budget is presented for the year 23-24, which is the upcoming year, they also have to say how they have done with respect to the last budget. So they had announced their budget 1 year ago, right? Did they do well? Did they stick to the budget? Because remember, budget estimate is a prediction for the future. It is not a fact. It is what is likely to happen. You are saying that next month I'm going to spend this much. Towards the end of April, now you will sit and create a budget for May. But towards the end of May, you have to know whether you stuck to your budget or not. Otherwise, there is no accountability there. So what do? They want to find out what actually happened. But unfortunately, the year is going to end. 2022-23 is going to end only on March 31, 2023. But they are already presenting the budget on February 1st, which means they don't have the complete information. So what do? They look at the half-year data from April to September, or maybe till December, and they publish a revised estimate for the present year. Present year in the sense, February 1, when they present, they are still in the year 2022-23. They revised the budget presented 1 year ago and they represented. Okay, so that is the revised estimate. And then they will present the actual data for 1 year before that. So there are 3 data that is given there. A data for the upcoming year budget estimate, a data which revises the current estimate, which is revised estimate, and a data for the last year, which is actual estimates or actuals. I hope that clarifies your question. Perfect. All right. So let me take a look at a couple of other questions as well. I'm not going to take up, I have got a boiled egg answer to the boiled egg question, but I don't know authentically. So I think I'll have to leave it to you. Please figure it out because I don't know that very specific information. Sir, this long document of a budget at glance is not showing the Google search. Kindly assist. I think I've shown it to you, Sashwata. I have not watched video of economic analysis of budget documents. Okay, that in fact this budget at a doc. Yes, that is enough. Kiritik, I think you analyze this particular document. I think that should be enough. In the question, second option, okay, done. Regarding tax buoyancy, will tax collection increase with better buoyancy? An increase in tax collection as a proportion of GDP is an indication of tax buoyancy. When the GDP increases by, let's say, 6%, if the tax revenue increases by more than 6%, that is buoyant tax. But if the GDP increases by 6%, but the tax revenue increases, but only by 3%, taxation system is not buoyant. So just because tax collection increases, you cannot claim the taxation system to be buoyant. Rajeshri, hope that clarifies your question. All right. I think I've answered all the question that is there. Is it necessary to tally with the previous budget estimate and revenue expenditure? See, there is a concept, please make a note of this. There is a concept called as fiscal marksmanship. Marksmanship, M-A-R-K-S-M-A-N-S-H-I-P, marksmanship. So what is meant by, so in general English, what is the meaning of the word marksman? Who is a marksman? Marksman is someone who looks at a target and either shoots or bow and arrow. So that is the person who's called as a marksman, someone who aims at a target and hits it. That's a good marksman. Fiscal marksmanship means that whatever is the fiscal data presented by the government, for example, on February 1, 2023, the government has presented the data for the upcoming year. Fiscal marksmanship means the government being accurate with respect to their projection. They have projected a data If the reality is as close to their projection, the government is a good marksman, or their budgeting has good marksmanship associated with it. It need not always be the case. A lot of times there are variations. Take a look at the variation here. The budget estimate for gross tax revenue was 27 lakh 57,000 crore, but the actual data was greater than that. Okay. So take a look at the size of the budget itself. So total receipts, the projection was only 39 lakh crore. The reality, 41. Not even the reality, because we will only know the reality 1 year later. So it need not always be the same. It need not always tally. Ideally, it should. If it does, that's what is called as fiscal marksmanship. If it doesn't, we are deviating from the fiscal targets that we have. Slightly deviating, which is not ideal. Okay. Lack of fiscal prudence is something that you might come across. T-bills is one type of GSEC. Then why in the document they say GSEC and T-bills separately? Because what they refer to as GSEC is dated GSEC. For convenience, when they generally refer to as GSEC, they might be referring to dated GSECs. That is the reason why they separately refer to GSEC and T-bill like that. In general conversation, colloquially, when you use the word GSEC, they are referring to dated GSECs, long term. T-bills is short term in nature. That's why. Okay. Hope that is clear. Satish Kumar, here it's actually a very, very important, relevant question that you asked. Technically, T-bill is a GSEC. It doesn't make sense. If you look at any RBI document, they will not randomly use the word GSEC. When they say GSEC, they include all borrowings of the government through instruments. But government uses it more generally. That's why. Sudarshan, the word actual means what is the actual data for the previous year? Previous year, present year, upcoming year. Upcoming year is an estimation of the budget. What is likely to happen? Present year is a revision of the budget. Past year alone, you can present the actual data. Next year, you will find the actuals. Next year, February 1, 2024, you will find actuals for 2022-23. You will find revised estimates for 2023-24. You will find budget estimates for 2024-25. That's what you will see in next year's document. They don't need to give this data. They are giving it so that we can look at it side by side and compare. This data is not new. This data is already there in last year's budget. This data was presented here in last year's budget. They need not present it. They have presented it so that you can read the budget estimate and revised estimate side by side for easy understanding. Hope that is clear. Okay. All right, perfect. So I think we can proceed. All right, moving on. Next question. Take a look at it. Time starts. All right, we are out of time. Not a very easy kind of question because it's not very common knowledge. There is a specific report called State Finances, a study of budgets. Consider the following observations and choose the correct ones as per the report. Okay, it's not very common. There is a reason why I asked this, because this is something that has been in the news. Center, state fighting with each other. State, center telling the states, you are not doing a good job with respect to your finances. Only if you meet these targets, we'll provide you loan. All those things that the center is saying. The RBI itself flagged the financial position of many states. RBI said these states are in trouble. It was there in the news. In the exam, you may get a very simple statement saying states finances, a study of budgets is published by which of the following organizations? Ministry of Finance, Reserve Bank of India. So it may be something, I'm just making up a question. It may be something as simple as that based on current affairs, but we don't know. So I have just taken up a random thing from the document just to convey to you that the document is important. Okay, just a couple of interesting observations. Okay, so states' own tax is the major source of receipts and the aggregate receipts of all states and UTs. That's one statement. Second, more than half the states failed to attain 14% GST revenue growth. What is the significance of 14%? That is a cutoff which was kept by the GST Council and said, if you fail to attain 14, whatever you fail by will provide compensation to that extent. Okay, that is what the GST Council had promised. That is why that 14% cutoff is important. So I need to take the document now. So I'm doing it right in front of you so that you don't have to, again, ask me where to find the document from. So what was the name of the report? It said study of budgets, right? State finances, a study of budgets. The most recent data, RBA, directly go to whoever publishes RBA data. Go to the document itself. This is where you get the document from RBI's website. You have the entire document here, state finances, a study of budgets. Okay, you have overview, you have forward, you have all of those things. Why bother about anything else? Just download, get the entire document. It's taking a little bit of time to load, as you can see. Yeah. So this is the document. Now, there is a very interesting part. Sometimes such questions are asked, what is the theme? Capital formation in India, the role of states. That is the tagline associated, but not sure UPSC will go for that. The role of capital formation. So here is the one. So we have major sources of receipts, right? So we have introduction, key fiscal indicators, receipts and expenditures. Both the statements here were about receipts. So let's go to page number 4. So that is where it's a big document. I'm not going to look at all of them. So you don't have to look at all of it either. So this is gross fiscal deficit of, I think, all states and UTs with legislature. What is it for the entire states, all states put together? The deficit indicators for individual states, you don't have to worry about this. If there is something unique, that is what you need to. So this is the table based on which that particular question is asked. So there is revenue receipts. Of the revenue receipts, the biggest share, it is not given in percentage, it's given in absolute terms. It is given in lakh crore. Okay. And what exactly was the statement? The statement is state's own tax is the major source of receipts in the aggregate receipts of. So you have the entire receipts over here. So revenue receipts separately, non-capital receipts separately is given, of which you will notice that revenue receipts is this much, 23.21, or you look at the most recent one, 38.57. Of that 38.57, okay, you will notice that 21.11 is state's own revenue, but our question is specifically about state's own tax revenue. State's own tax revenue is still 17.87, not percentage, lakh crore. Look at any other number that is there. Central transfer is overall, but inside central transfer, there is shareable taxes, which is actually the state's own money. And then grants and aid. Individually, it's only 8 and 9%. But if you look at state's own tax, it is a major source. This is an important data because conventionally we think state has very less in the form of source of collecting taxes. So their source of money in the form of taxes is going to be very, very minimal. Not true. In fact, state's own taxes is a big part of their own revenue, their own receipts. Okay. So to convey that, which goes against our conventional knowledge. Okay, which goes against our conventional knowledge. So that is what is important over here. Everything else is very, very small. Okay. I told you a term earlier, fiscal marksmanship. You find the term over here. Okay. And what are the two data which is compared? Budget estimate, revised estimate. So this is a measurement of, statistically, but not important for us. This is a measurement of how far away they are from their projections. Okay. So a lot of information like this is given. Then you have again, receipts itself, there is GST data which is given. Let me see where I can find it. Okay, so maybe I'll go for the simpler option and look for, there are quite a lot of references. Okay. Okay, so we have it here. Okay. So 10 states are expected to fall short of 14% GST growth as per their budget estimates. Okay. The data is given here. So why is that important? Because look at this. There is an image that is associated with it. States with less than 14% growth in GST in 2022-23. Okay. So all that you need to know, again, don't memorize how many states and all those things. Look at it. Is it all the states in the country? Most of the states in the country? No, it is less than half of the states that is there. So only 10 states out of, not only, but it is still not more than half. So 10 states out of 28 are falling short. 18 states are meeting the GST target that is there. Now, let me reiterate, this is not the specific data that is important. We can't guess what UPSC asks from. I have just taken two readily available information, which is in the news as well. States, center state conflict that is there, states feeling that they are not getting enough money from the center. So we ask a question. So what is the major source of state's revenue? Then the GST compensation is something that is again frequently in the news. So how many states are actually benefiting out of the GST compensation? 10 states out of 28 are. No, imagine that 20 states out of 28 were having GST revenue less than 14%. It makes no sense to cancel the GST compensation, and it makes all the sense to provide GST compensation for the further period of time, because majority of states in that case, assuming that let's say 20 out of 28 states were having a GST growth rate of less than 14%, then it makes sense to extend that. Now the center has not extended it. Why? What is the logic associated with it? Because 10 states out of 28 are the ones which require. Okay. So this is again certain observations. It's a very big document, 312 pages. I don't expect you to go through all of it, but take a look at the heading that is given over here, the index that is there. Take a look at the index and ask yourself, with a little bit of experience and preparation, you will be able to give yourself certain parameters as to what you think is important. So take a look at the entire heading, just 2 or 3 pages. Look at what might be important among this. 99% of this document is going to be useless. Okay, which means of 300 pages, 99% would be let's say 3 pages. Other than 3 pages, everything else is fairly useless. So what are those three, or maybe 99% is too much. Say 10 pages out of 312 might be important for you to go through. But the question is, which are those 10 pages? Take a look at the index. Index may, so certain parts of the document may interest you. Just go through, see if there is any graph or image or data associated with it. Only when that is there, it makes sense. Although I have shown you inside paragraph, everything I show inside paragraph has a picture or an image associated with it. Okay, so that becomes important. How much is states borrowing? How much is the cumulative deficit that they have? Those might be the major things that you need to know. Okay, so that is with respect to this particular question. That actually ends our entire part with respect to public finance. I think it's a little bit more is there. So we'll move on then. Bharat Kumar, you have sent something which I'm not able to see. I'm only seeing it as a box. So I told you the answer here is A. Okay, one only. Moving on then. Time starts. How come only 2 people have answered for very, very less response? Time is out. Okay, now I'm getting a lot of answers. Fair enough. Okay. Still very less. Only about 10 or 12 have answered. These are skip. These are more like the current affairs that we expect from UPSC. Okay. All right. Great. So one statement you should blindly assume it to be right. Look at the second statement. The proceed. Look at the heading: sovereign green bonds. Okay. Green bond. That name is enough. The proceeds are to be deployed in public sector projects which will help reduce economy's carbon intensity. Reduce economy's carbon intensity. Carbon intensity reduction means greening. That there should be no doubt about it. The next question is it going to be used in public sector projects? Look at the name, sovereign. Sovereign means government. Government is borrowing. Government is going to use the money for public sector projects, most likely. So that is a logical guess. I don't think you should consider there is any logic for you. Tell me if there is any, but I don't think there is any logic by which the second statement can be considered as wrong. I don't know. Some people have answered A, not a lot. A few people have given A as answer, which is surprising for me. So 2 has to be correct. Now comes the type of trickery which UPC sometimes follows. SGBs, sovereign green bonds amounting to 1,600 crore are to be issued as a part of government's overall market borrowing in the fiscal year 2022-23. If you apply a little bit of logic, you would know that 1,600 crore is a very, very small sum. Okay, it's actually 16,000 crore. And this is precisely the type of mistakes that UPC makes in their question. Instead of 100, they'll give 1,000. Instead of 10,000, they'll give 100. Instead of 10,000, they'll give 1,000. So these are the kind of errors that they tend to make. And that is precisely why I removed from some 10 and put it over there. Everything else about it is correct. 1,600 is not the correct one. 16,000 crore is what is the correct one. Okay. So other than that, everything else is correct. So sovereign green bonds, the intention of the government is to borrow money to be used for public sector projects, which are green initiatives. So anything that has green initiative associated with it, that is what the intention for the government is. And this happened very recently. Only in 2023 January, they actually issued it, although it was announced in the last budget. So it is very recent current affairs as well. Okay. So please read up a little bit. There is a framework on sovereign green bonds as well. I'm not going to go through the entire document, but there is something like that. There's something called as sovereign green bonds. There is a framework. Look at it, Department of Economic Affairs, the government document itself. I'm not expecting you to go through this 21 pages. Is not much, but just the introduction or something like that you can read to get an idea. So what they have given inside is not necessarily related to green bond itself. They have given about nationally determined contribution goals and all those things, and say that ultimately the objective is to meet some of these targets. Okay, so that is all of the context. This is where the actual document starts from here. So this is what it starts, and they have said what are the core components of green bond principles, how are they going to use it. Don't memorize any of this, please. Don't, it's not worth it. Just know, have a general idea. What is the amount? What is the general philosophy that they are going to adopt? That is enough. Okay. And without even studying all these things, you can understand green means it has to be some ecologically or environmentally friendly objective. Only thing, just do a normal Google search. You'll know the amount of money that they are trying to raise and all those things. Just some basic information is enough. You don't have to come to this document. I'm just showing you because there is an official source. Nothing wrong with coming here. Always rely on the best source, but you can also rely on PIB also. Let's see if there is a PIB document. I'm not sure. Green bonds. Yeah. So PIB, sovereign green bonds, 16,000 crore. What more do you need? Everything is there. Amounting to 16,000 crore. 8,000 has already been issued. 6th February 2023. Very recent news. Okay. Resources. Government's overall borrowing deployed in public sector. Okay. Verbatim, whatever I have asked. Reduce economy's carbon intensity. Okay. Maybe I should not have shown the source. I got caught. using the same words. Okay, let's move on quickly from this area. I think that answers the question. The first statement alone is wrong. Okay. Next question. External sector. Almost done. All right. Which is correct? Let me see. A lot of people have said A. Okay. Since so many people are saying A, I have to go with A. A is the correct answer. India has so far concluded 13 free trade agreements and 6 preferential trade agreements. That's correct. It's a factual thing. Second and third is almost correct because you have heard news that India has signed an agreement with UAE, India has signed an agreement with Australia. Both are free trade agreements. The only error is it is interchanged. The CEPA has been signed with UAE, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, and ECT, Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, has been signed with Australia. CEPA, from my understanding, has a much wider scope because it includes investment, it includes mobility of workers, all those things are included. Services are included inside that. With the UAE one, which was in the news much more than what was in with respect to Australia. So that is interchange. CEPA is with UAE and ECTA is with Australia. So both the statements, because they are interchanged, they are wrong. A one only is the correct answer over here. Okay. The correct answer is A, one only. Now, where do we get this particular data from? Again, the same logic that you apply is don't go looking for this data. Just look for, let's say, trade agreements. And why are we looking for it? Because UAE agreement was signed, because the Australia agreement was signed, looking for PIB. So FTAs with respect to, so here it is. Heading itself has it. 2022 July, which is still part of our information. Again, India has signed 13 RTAs, regional trade agreements or free trade agreements with various countries. That is given over here. Okay, at least it is not verbatim. Okay. So what are the various countries with which we have trade agreements? It is given over here. So we have trade agreements with these entities. We have trade agreements. That list is given over here. What are the 13 countries? Okay. So as of the publishing of this was not implemented. So with UAE and Australia, but subsequently it's been. In addition, India has also signed 6 preferential trade agreements, including Asia Pacific trade agreement. So that is also given there. So you will have other places where you have the entire data that is given there. Now, look at this. CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, is with United Arab Emirates, and ECTA, Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, is with Australia. So this one itself conveys all the information that is necessary for us. PIB has all the data that is necessary. Let's also take a look at this. Yeah, so here is the 13 plus 6. The 13 is given over here. What are the various countries with which we have? And the 6 is given over here with which we have preferential trade agreements. Okay. So I am not waiting for you to make notes or anything because you can find the source on your own. So what is the difference between free trade and preferential trade agreement? So preferential trade agreement means it's much limited in scope. So if you are going into economic theory, preferential trade agreement is the starting point. Building up on top of that, we'll get to free trade agreements. Then we have common markets, customs union, and so on, economic integration, and all those things that happen later. But more commonly, you will find preferential trade and free trade agreements. What is the difference? When two countries enter into preferential trade agreement, they agree that On certain commodities alone, they will have free trade. So restricted free trade agreement. So India and let's say India and some countries signs a preferential trade agreement. They say on this 5 commodities, these 5 commodities or these 10 commodities alone, we will do the trading. So this is what is called as creating a positive list. So preferential trade agreements are associated or have a positive list associated with them. What is a positive list? A list of items on which preferential trade or free trade would happen. Okay. On all other items, it is normal. No free trade, no preferences. On these select items alone, there will be preferential trade or free trade between the two countries. Whereas when it comes to a free trade agreement, their agreement is like this. On all the goods and services, that the goods and services, it depends. Sometimes it's goods only, sometimes it's services also, like we saw with SEPA and ECT. So on all the commodities, there will be free trade except a list of items. On these items, we are not going to allow because we want to protect our domestic industry. Okay, so that is what is called as a negative list, where everything is under free trade except this list of items. Okay, so negative list. Preferential trade agreement has a positive list associated with it. Free trade agreement has a negative list associated. Okay, so conceptually, this is something for us to note as well. Okay, the answer here is A, one only. Moving to the next question. So we are going to have a series of external sector questions. Time starts. Okay, time out. A lot of people have given me the correct answer. The correct answer here is B. 2 only. B is correct, not C. B. So let's take a look at the data associated with it. Economic survey, external sector. And made a few markings, which is so. How did I get to this? I showed you earlier, right? I went to just type external sector, scroll down, you will find the external sector chapter over there. So you will find the document over there. Okay, so first basic information that you have is during this fiscal, India's exports have displayed resilience on the back of record levels of exports. What are the key export items that we have? Petroleum products, gems and jewelers, organic and inorganic chemicals, drugs and pharmaceuticals were among leading export items. Please make a note. What are the leading export items of India? Okay. Similarly, do we have anything about imports? Apart from elevated crude oil prices, the revival of economic activity contribute to increase. Okay. Petroleum crude and imports, petroleum crude and products, electronic goods, coal, coke and briquettes, etc. Machinery, electrical, non-electrical, gold were among the top import items. Please make a note of that as well. Okay, a very general thing. Balance of payments encountered pressures during the year under review, which means balance of payments did not do particularly well. Okay. Sharp rise in oil prices resulted in widening current account deficit, not cushioned by invisible receipts. Policy tightening by Federal Reserve. We are going to discuss that. And strengthening of US dollar led to FPA outflows. Okay. As a result, surplus in capital account was lower than current account deficit, leading to depletion of forex on BOP basis. Forex has been reducing. We have been seeing that in the news as well. So this is just from the first page, the italicized one. All our key information is taken up. That's it. You don't have to go any deeper into the economic survey in general. But let's take a look at what is given over here as well with respect to trade, the merchandise trade. What exactly is the question that we have asked? The question is Exports of petroleum oil and lubricants constitute about half of the total exports in terms of value. Petrol, oil, and lubricants exports constitute around 20%, and non-POL exports, petroleum oil lubricants, constitute around 80% of the exports during that particular year. Okay. It continued to be the most exported commodity. Owing to the rise in global crude prices, petroleum products continued to be the most exported commodity in India's context, followed by gems and jewelers, organic chemicals, drugs, and pharmaceuticals. But still, to say that it contributes half of India's exports is an exaggeration. So we know petroleum oil and lubricants is a significant part. It is the highest. It occupies the number one position when it comes to exports also. Crude oil we import. Refined petroleum we export. Petroleum products we export. We also import petroleum products, some kinds of petroleum products, but it's not half. Half is an exaggeration. Half is too much. So that is what makes the first statement wrong. Second statement is correct. It contributes 1/3, or it accounts for 1/3 of the value. Energy demand may be pushing India's imports. Yes. So petroleum. So energy demand may be pushing India's imports for fuel, including coal and petroleum oil lubricants, whose share rose to 37.1%. It says more than 1/3, more than 33%. Other principal imports included electronic goods, coal, coke, briquettes, machinery, whatever we saw earlier. Okay, so that is what is of significance roughly. So look at how the question is framed: 1/3, not 37%, around 1/3, more than 1/3. So that is how the question is looked at. So petroleum, we know you would have heard of a concept called as windfall taxes, which was in the news. That is again in the context of the same thing. Now, because of the global rise in fuel prices, when we bought at a lower price. Before the war broke out, we bought at a lower price. Then we were refining. When we sold, the petroleum prices have gone so high that the petroleum companies were making huge profits. This unexpected, unanticipated, sudden gains is what is called as windfall gains. WINDFALL, windfall. Windfall means something that is unexpected and huge. Okay, sudden huge gains is windfall gains, windfall profits. When the petroleum companies got those windfall profits, the government introduced a new tax called as windfall gains tax or windfall tax, which means you are making unexpected gains. On those unexpected gains, I'm going to tax you more than what I usually do. But once your gains normalize, we will not collect those taxes anymore. Only because you are getting windfall gains, we are collecting windfall tax. So windfall tax is also something that you saw in the news. In the context of that, they may not ask a question about windfall tax. They may ask a question about the data that is related to it. Or they may ask a windfall gains or tax question itself. We don't know. Okay, but that is how we interpret data. That is why POL becomes very important, because there is global, there is war with Russia, or sorry, not war with Russia. Russia and Ukraine is war is going on. Russia has become the major supplier of petroleum products or crude petroleum for India, replacing other your Gulf nations and some other nations that were there. So all these are of significance. This is what you see in the news. The question may be about any of this. Okay. So let me take a look at if there's any question that is left or left unanswered. Moving on. So the answer here is first one is wrong, second one is right. 2 only B is the answer. Moving to the next one. Time starts. I've got only 2 answers out of 100 odd people. Now it's 4 answers. Slowly increasing. Time has run out. We'll wait for a few more seconds. All right. So I know at this point, some of you are thinking, why are all the questions so much about data and all those things? I told you in the beginning of the session itself, my intention is not to cover everything that is there in current affairs. My intention is to cover those areas which you may otherwise miss out on. You may not focus on these areas only. Not only those areas, those are some of the areas which I've picked up. And this interpretation of data or collecting data is something that you may not ready be, it may not be readily available with you, which is why I'm picking these areas and I'm explaining it to you. Okay, don't think that this is what, see, some of you, especially if you're preparing for the first time, you would have prepared so much of concepts and then now you come here in this session and everything is all data. Is that how UPSC is going to ask? No, that is not how UPSC is going to ask. These are just to help you fill in those areas which you may not have covered already. This one session is not sufficient to cover the entire current affairs. I told you that in the beginning itself. So I'm picking on areas which I feel that you might have missed out on. Okay. Anyway, so the answer here is, let's take a look at the statement. Consider the following statements about external debt of India based on the data from economic survey. Short-term debt accounts for around 1/5 of the total debt. Okay. So that is again a very data-driven question. Short-term debt means debt that we have to repay in a period of 1 year, within 1 year. So it's an external debt analysis kind of question. UPSC has asked such questions in the past. In what currency is most of India's dollar denominated? Those kind of questions. Short term versus long term, something that is asked. Then second, India's total external debt obligations is in excess of foreign exchange reserves, which is very hard to believe, but that is true. In fact, both the statements here are true. 13, the answer is C, both 1 and 2. We will take a look at the data that is associated with it. Same external sector, chapter, economic survey. We'll go to debt. Capital account is where we have debt. So we have reached debt. Although I have picked debt, don't focus on debt alone. You have FDI, net FDI. Is it showing an increasing trend, decreasing trend? You have capital account balance. You have composition of capital account. What is the direction? All those are observations that you can make. Net FPI, it is showing a negative trend during certain paths, but all of these are quarterly. Just make a note of this. All these are also important. I just happen to have picked up about, this is Forex reserves, about debt. That's all. Okay. So did I cross debt? I think I might have crossed debt. No, external debt is here. Okay. External debt. There are two data, two tables. Okay. This is the table that based on which the question is. Okay. This is how much our external debt is across the, over the years. This table, external debt. This is the table, external debt in US, a billion. That is how usually it is denominated, not in rupees. Usually it is in US dollars. So end September, so somewhere around 600 billion US dollars. Ratio of external debt to GDP, roughly around 20%. Okay. Debt service ratio, our capability to service and the amount that we have to pay during a given period of time. Ratio of forex reserves to external debt. So 96.5 or 87.3 or 98. There's only one period where you will find a number greater than 100. What does greater than 100 mean? Look at the heading, ratio of forex to total debt. Forex on top, total debt at the bottom. Only when forex is greater than total debt will it be greater than 100. Based on the latest data, the most recent data that we have, it is lesser than 100. For most years, you will notice that it is lesser than 100, which means most of the times, forex is lesser than what is our total debt, which means we don't have enough money in our reserves to repay all our loan. However, look at this. This is where the first statement becomes important. Ratio of short-term debt to forex reserves. Ratio of short-term debt is only around 20%. So ratio of short-term debt to total debt, it's only around 20%. which means our immediate repayment obligations, we have enough money in our forex reserves. Even if nothing else works, we can take our forex reserves. 20% of our forex reserves we pay. Our short-term debt is done. Short-term debt means within 1 year what we have to repay. Everything else is long-term obligation. So we have signed a contract with Japan, let's say, where they are giving us money which we have to repay over 30 years. They cannot come next year and suddenly say, no, we need money, give it back. No, loan agreement is signed. There is no way that they can ask us the money before time. It is not possible, which means that having long-term debt is good. It is sustainable debt. Having high short-term debt is troublesome. So what was our question here? Our question was short-term debt accounts for around 1/5 of the total debt, 20% of the total external debt that is there. The question itself is about external debt. So 1/5, 20% is correct. See, Kirtik, the question is consider the following statements. So what is Kirtik's question here is, here short-term debt accounts for around 1/5 of the total debt, right? So total debt. The question is it total debt of the country as a whole or is it total external debt alone? You don't have to worry about that because look at the question. The question says consider the statements about external debt of India, which means both the statements are about external debt, which means what they refer to as total debt here is total external debt of the country. If it is ambiguous, this is how you have to make sense of it. Okay. Okay, so I'll answer. There is one more question that has come in. I'll answer that also. So this is short-term debt accounts for around 1/5 of the total debt. That is correct. India's total external debt obligation is in excess of forex reserves. That is also correct. We just saw as per the data from the economic survey, most recent data. So both the statements are correct. Now there is a question which Rajashekharan also. Now I think that clarifies your question. The question itself says about external debt of India. So it is about external debt. Even when we say total debt, the larger question is about external debt. Okay. Hope that clarifies that particular query. And now Satish Kumar's question. Sir, but our external debt is only 10% we saw before. No, it is not 10%. It is 1%, Satish Kumar, not 10%. Of the total borrowing of the government of India, government's borrowing from outside India was only 1%. That is government's borrowing. Government's external debt is different. A country's external debt is different. Again, to convey that point, take a look at this table. The table that is given before. What are the sources of, or who is the one who's borrowing? External debt outstanding. Of the total outstanding external debt, general government borrowing, which means center plus state. How can state borrow? Center borrows on behalf of the states for these developmental projects, metro construction, all those things, central bank borrowing, corporations. But if you look at it, the most important contributor towards this borrowing is financial corporations, private entities, external commercial borrowings. That is what is a big percentage of the borrowing. Okay, so the question, Satish Kumar, earlier was about government's internal and external debt. This question is about external debt in general. What is the difference between government's external debt and country's external debt? Karthikeyan, if you as an individual happen to borrow from a foreign bank, if it is possible, then that was also a part of external debt in the balance of payments transaction. Look, see, for all of these things, what you have to understand is the definition of balance of payments. So how do we define balance of payments? Balance of payments is a record of transactions of all residents of India with the rest of the world and vice versa. All residents of India, not only the government. So in the balance of payments, we have current account and capital account. And in the capital account is what we have loans. That loan is what is the external debt over here. Who all could be borrowing? Government could be borrowing, but private corporations could also be borrowing. Okay. Sometimes it is easier to raise money from a foreign country. Why? Because we know this particular logic. Most of you know this logic. We have discussed this in class many times. Okay. Same logic that I've discussed before. I'll ask you a question. Which country is likely to have a higher rate of growth? Developed country or developing country? We have discussed this previously. The answer is developing country is likely to have a higher rate of growth or has the potential to have a higher rate of growth. Why? Because a lot of untapped potential. Correct, Rajashekharan, Mithilesh. Correct. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Karthik, correct. So they are the ones who are likely to have a higher rate of growth. And because the rate of growth is going to be higher in developing countries, the demand for money is going to be greater in developing countries because more businesses need money. When the demand for money is higher, the rate of interest is also going to be higher. So if an Indian company wants to borrow from India, they have to pay a higher interest. What is the repo rate in India? Somewhere around 6%, 6.5%. What is the equivalent of the repo rate in European countries and in America? Somewhere around 1% or 2%, which means borrowing from foreign countries is much, much cheaper. So a lot of corporations in India, I agree, there is a risk of depreciating Indian currency because the profits made by the Indian companies in Indian rupees. When they have to repay in foreign currency. There is an exchange rate risk that is associated with it. But if the exchange rate risk is not major, then it is quite possible that a lot of Indian corporations will try to borrow from foreign sources because the rate of interest is very, very low. So private corporations borrow, external commercial borrowings, government borrowing, NRI deposits that come into banks are also treated as loans. All of these are other than government sources of borrowing. So that is where external debt is different. External debt is a much bigger concept. Government borrowing from outside India is a much smaller concept within it. Okay, hope that clarifies it. Thus, government external borrowing is lesser than forex. Government external borrowing is lesser than forex. Yes, Satish Kumar, that is correct. Okay. All right, got it. Great. I think I've answered if there is any pending question, please let me know. Moving on to the next question. Time starts. Okay, why is the time not running out? Maybe I clicked something which made the time not run out. Okay, time is run out. Okay, so I happen to, there is a Q&A part here, where I happen to miss looking at the answers. Sorry about that. Right from the beginning, I happen to have missed out on that. Okay, so let's take a look at what's given. Consider the following statements about effective exchange rate. Effective exchange rate is a summary indicator of movements of the home currency against a basket of currencies of trading partners. Rear is the near adjusted by relative prices captured by inflation differentials between home country and trading partners. OEA, Office of the Economic Advisor, compiles and disseminates both the trade and export weighted indices of near and rear. Okay, so lot of answers. It says B, A. A is the dominant answer. Okay, fair enough. C is also given as an answer. We mug up the country names. Tamil, I don't, regarding the earlier question, I don't think you need to mug up as such, but have a general idea with respect to, so neighboring countries. If you happen to have an agreement with a neighboring country, it becomes important. So don't just blindly memorize it, but have a general idea about it. Okay, so the answer to this particular question now, coming to the question at hand, EER. So the reason why we have this question as significant, and last year also UPSC had asked a question, it's because the RBI recently, a year back, made a change with respect to the countries which are included in this basket of currencies. So first of all, there is a concept called as exchange rate. Exchange rate in general means the value of Indian rupee in the Indian context, the value of Indian rupee against one particular foreign country's currency. A comparison of two currencies is the conventional exchange rate that we have. What is effective exchange rate? So India wants to understand the competitiveness of the Indian currency, trade competitiveness or export competitiveness of Indian rupee. So what do? We look at our major trading partners. Okay. So Indian rupee is compared with every single major trading partner. Let's say 40 countries. I think the recent list has 40 countries inside it. Okay. Indian rupee versus the 40 major trading partners of India. Now, each trading partner has their own relative importance, right? Some countries more important, some countries less important. So, Indian rupee versus US dollar, and USA is given assigned a certain weightage. So, based on that weightage, their value will be a proportion of that weightage. Let's say 50% is the assume 50% is the weightage given for US dollar. Then US dollar's value will be reduced to half. Just like how our price index, CPA, WPA, just like how those are calculated, weightages are assigned for the various trading partners of India, and a cumulative value is arrived as 1 rupee is equal to this much value. Okay, so that is what is called as effective exchange rate. It is a summary indicator of movements of the home currency against a basket of trading partners. The first statement is correct. Okay, second one, rear is near adjusted for relative prices, adjusted by relative prices captured by inflation differentials between home country and trading partners. It is something that you should be answering without even knowing what is near and rear, because it's only a question of real versus nominal. Real is equal to nominal adjusted for inflation is general logic that you should be knowing. Whenever you come across real and nominal, what is the difference? Inflation is the difference. Nominal is adjusted for inflation, you will get real value in inflation. So the second statement is also correct. Okay, so 1 and 2 are correct. The only question is it A or is it D? Office of the Economic Advisor is not the one which compiles and disseminates the data. It is the Reserve Bank of India which disseminates both the data. Okay, so that is the error over there. So third statement is wrong. 1 and 2 are correct. Okay. Hope that answers this particular question. Some people had answered C. I don't know why you think A, first statement is wrong logically. Okay. Explain near and rear. Oh, I just did that. No. So Indian rupee is there. So Indian rupee compared to a basket of currencies. Okay. So this is what is effective exchange rate. This effective exchange rate is what is called as near nominal effective exchange rate. When, see, Indian rupee versus US dollar inside that basket, if you take into account Indian rupees, India's inflation versus the foreign countries, USA's inflation, and calculate that. And similarly, for every single country, if you take India's price index versus their price index, that will be called as rear. Near and rear is different. Simply that in rear, nominal inflation is taken into consideration. In near, that is not taken into consideration. Okay. It is not very important to go into the mathematical details of this. Okay. Weightage is not assumed. Weightage is actually calculated. RBI does the calculation of weightage. Okay. Just take a look at this. Near EER, RBI. So this is how you search for things. Okay. Effective exchange rate of the Indian rupee. This was in January 21, 2021, a couple of years ago now. Existing basket is expanded from 36 to 40 countries with the inclusion of 8 new currencies and exclusion of 4 currencies. That is why it was in the news. Okay. So what are the weightages that are assigned? Export trade-based weightage. The weightage is given over here. This is to answer Sudarshan. Export-based weightage is given over here. Okay. In the previous and the present. So the two things are given over here. What are the 40 currencies that are there? Eventually a value. The formula for calculating near nominal effective exchange rate. So this is how it is calculated. Let's take one particular country. Let's take USA. So E is the exchange rate of, let's say what is given as E over here. So E is Indian currency's exchange rate in comparison to, so it is always a comparison. So what they are using as the reference point is IMF's currency. IMF has a currency called as special drawing rights. It's almost like a currency for them. So E is the exchange rate of rupee against the SDR divided by the exchange rate of the foreign currency against the SDR. So it is between that E by EI. And then there is a square root in terms of the weightage that is assigned to that particular country. This mathematics is not important. I'm just trying to convey to you, it is a comparison between two currencies and a basket of that. Look at this, it is given as I is equal to 1 to n. 1 to n refers to the 40 countries. I is equal to 1 to 40. For every single country, we do this, and cumulatively, everything is added. And that is what is referred to as near. Now, what is the difference between near and rear? The formula is almost identical. We only have P. P is the price index in India. PI is the price index in the foreign country. So when you take that also into consideration, the comparison of the prices in the two countries, then that becomes real effective exchange rate. So if you are mathematically oriented, it's not important for UPSC exam. If you want to really understand this concept, you can probably go through this. Or just simply read up the basics of it, and that should be enough. Okay. All right. So someone is asking, without any name, UPSC prep. It says, sir, the recent news on moving away from US dollar being global exchange currency and looking at the agenda of countries like Russia and China being pro-yuan and Bangladesh agreeing to get on to trade with Russia in yuan for nuke plant installation. If at all there is a predominant shift considering in the exchange currency and relationship with China, Russia, with respect to India, as contrasting one is a close friend and another is a close aggressive neighbor. How will India's position of stance be in the case? How will it affect our global trade? Yeah. So we don't see, I'll give you a one-line answer. So the question is essentially, if US dollar ceases to be a global currency and if Russian currency or Chinese currency becomes the global currency, what is its implications on India? Simple answer is we don't know. We can't guess what might happen. We don't know whether we will continue to have a poor relationship with China forever. Yesterday, you saw a news, India and China have agreed to sort out the differences. Once our border agreements or disagreements are sorted out, and there is nothing which cannot be sorted. If it is sorted out, okay, then India and China may not be aggressive enemies. Once again, it could become Indo-Chini bye-bye, like we believed it was prior to the 1961 war. You never know. There are never permanent allies or enemies. USA tried to negotiate with North Korea. No? It almost seemed like there was some result that was going to happen. Did not happen, but you can never know. So you can never guess what can happen. It's a very hypothetical question which won't lead us anywhere. Okay. Don't be worried about the time. I know the time is till 8 o'clock. I know we have finished only half. The number of remaining questions doesn't go into this much of detailed analysis and all those things. Much simpler questions are in store. Okay, welcome, nameless person. Okay, moving on. Next question. Time has started. Okay, so we are out of time. What is Nostro in the news because of precise issue that the person was addressing? The answer here is D. All three statements given here are correct. It is just an explanation concept. I wanted you to know what it is. So this is how it works. Okay, imagine two banks are there. There is State Bank of India, and let's say there is an equivalent bank in Australia, or let's take Russia itself. There is a Russian bank because Russia and India is where the context of the news is. Okay. So what is a Vostro account? It is one that a domestic bank holds. SBI in India holds an account for a foreign bank. The Russian bank holds an account in India. Okay. In Indian rupee, for example, an Indian oil company buys oil from Russia. So we have to pay them. But now US dollar is not allowed. USA is saying that we won't allow anyone to transact with Russia in US currency. So we are in an advantageous position. We tell Russia we'll pay in Indian rupee. Russia says, okay, fine. As long as you buy, it's okay. So what will Russia do with Indian rupee? Absolutely nothing. So Russia says, you keep it in your account in India. Later, when we buy something from you, you can take that money from there. Rather than Russia paying us separately, they'll see deducted from this account. So SBI holds an account for the Russian bank, okay, where the Russian money is kept inside SBI's account. That is a Vostro account. A Vostro account is one that a domestic bank holds for a foreign bank in domestic bank's currency. We call this account as Vostro. What will the Russian bank call this account as? The Russian bank will call the same account as a Nostro account. Now look at the same account from the Russian bank's perspective. Nostro account is one that a foreign bank, for Russia, SBI is foreign bank. Agreed? From Russian perspective. From Russian perspective, the same account that SBI is holding, SBI is a foreign bank now, held for a domestic bank. The Russian bank is the domestic bank. In the foreign bank's currency, Indian rupee, it is maintained. So the same account is what is referred to as Vostro as well as Nostro. From the account holder's perspective, India holds the account, Indian bank holds the account, India will call it as a Vostro account. The same account, Russia will refer to it as a Nostro account. Let's say we buy something from Russia and Russia buys something from us, and instead of paying in US dollar, they are saying we'll pay in Russian currency. What will we do with Russian currency? No other country may accept it. So we say keep the money with them yourself. So then we'll call that account to be Vostro. They will call, Nostro. They'll call it to be Vostro. So it is just interchange. It's the same account. When we call it, we refer to as Vostro. When they refer to the same account, they'll call it as Nostro. Okay, so the first two statements are explanations. In the Indian context, more usage of Vostro account helps in internationalization of rupee. More Vostro means that more and more people or more and more countries are okay with transacting in rupee. Look at the first statement. Vostro account, foreign bank holds an account in the domestic bank in domestic bank's currency. So if more Vostro account is opened in India, it means that more and more countries are accepting Indian currency for transactions, which means greater international use of rupee. That is what we refer to as internationalization of rupee or usage of rupee in international transactions. So all three statements are correct. In a very similar sense, we have one more question coming up. Take a look at it. Time starts. All right. So time done. Let's take a look at it. It is a process, internationalization of rupee. It is a process that involves increasing the use of local currency in cross-border transactions. Correct. It increases the exchange rate risk on domestic traders. In fact, it is the opposite. When does the exchange rate risk come in? When we are dealing in foreign currency. If there is a depreciation of Indian currency, then payment in foreign currency becomes that much harder. Okay, so the exchange rate risk on domestic traders is greater if you are dealing in foreign currency, whereas if you are dealing in Indian currency, the risk is reduced to a large extent. So second statement is wrong. It decreases the exchange rate risk on domestic traders is the correct answer. Then 16, it may limit, third statement, it may limit India's ability to anchor monetary policy to its domestic economic landscapes. Now, this is a problem which a country like USA also faces. Their currency is internationally used for transactions. They cannot arbitrarily reduce or increase the money supply without considering international implications. So similarly, if Indian currency becomes broadly used outside or widely used outside, then we have to not just look at the domestic conditions, we have to look at the international impact of changing our money supply as well. Okay, because it will have a great impact globally. So it limits our ability to anchor monetary policy to domestic landscapes because international aspects will also come into the picture. Third statement is correct. Answer is B, 1 and 3 only. Second statement is wrong. Okay, so it's an extension of the previous question in that sense. Okay, so earlier there was a question that near is equal to rear minus inflation. Am I right? It is not minus inflation. Adjusted for inflation is the right term. Anonymous attendee. Hope that clarifies. I know I'm answering it a little late still. Okay, so 17th question. Time starts. We are moving on to the last, I think, in exchange rate. Okay, we have run out of time. So if I didn't mention answer to the previous one, 16th one, the answer is B, 1 and 3. Second one is wrong, I had said. Okay, anyway, 17. Now, again, a very conceptual kind of a question, but based on current affairs, US Federal Reserve had actually increased interest rates. What would happen? You saw that in the external sector document that I showed as well. The economic survey document on external sector also had this in the paragraph, highlighted paragraphs. So US Federal Reserve increases the interest rate. So foreign investors are thinking, we came to India thinking India is providing higher returns. Now USA itself is providing comparatively higher returns. Let's go back to USA. Capital flight happens. So when they take their foreign currency outside, there is a greater demand for foreign currency because they are asking, they are investing and doing everything in Indian currency. When they go back, they want their foreign currency back. So there is an increased demand for foreign currency within India. When the demand for foreign currency is greater than the supply, what happens? Indian currency starts depreciating. Previously, people were willing to pay only 80 rupees to get a dollar. Now, because of the high demand, they're having to pay 85 or 90 or 95 rupees. Depreciation of Indian rupee happens. To prevent this situation, what is RBI's likely reaction when Federal Reserve raises the interest rates? India has to offer an even higher return for the investors to prevent the capital flight. So RBI is also likely to raise the repo rate in as a reaction to the Federal Reserve's action. So all four are possibilities over here. Most people have answered given the correct answer for 17, which shows that you have good hold over the concept. All four are correct. 18. We are moving on to inflation. Very good. Salai Sivasigaran from maybe Salai, are you? I wonder. Great. I have a friend from there. Okay, so 18th, yeah, so timeout. 18th answer is correct. A, again, most people have answered it. I think you guys are quite strong. Most of you who are attending are quite strong with your concepts because concept questions, you are getting it right. It is part of liquidity adjustment facility. Yes, there are two main tools of liquidity adjustment in India right now, repo rate and standing deposit facility. But as a corridor, when you look at it, there is a third thing also which is added, which is the marginal standing facility. Okay, so if you're looking at it as a corridor, there is a repo rate in the middle, 0.25 percentage points greater than that is the marginal standing facility, 0.25 percentage points lesser than that is the standing deposit facility. If repo rate is 6%, MSF is 6.25, SDF is 5.75. That's how it is linked. So it acts as the floor of the LAF corridor. MSF acts as the ceiling of it. Repo rate is in the middle. It is the anchor. Okay, so it is a part of the framework, acts as floor, it's correct. It is a collateral based tool for absorbing excess liquidity from the economy. Reverse repo rate was a collateral based tool. But because this is the standing facility, which means RBI says it is available at any time you want. Whenever you want, you can come and deposit money with RBI. RBI says we will not give any collateral to you. So it is a collateral free tool, not collateral based. It is a tool without collateral, as someone has rightly explained as well. Arvind has rightly explained, does not need collateral. Correct. Its regular operation will be at the discretion of RBI. Repo rate, reverse repo rate works on the discretion of RBI. Reverse repo rate is not used anymore. MSF, SDF, look at the word standing. Standing means available at all times. RBI doesn't have to explicitly make it available. So it's a standing facility. Both the standing facilities are not at the discretion of RBI. Of course, RBI is the one which introduces it, but once it introduces it, it is available for the banks at any point of time till the RBI makes any change to this. So it's a standing facility. It's a regular operation, will not be at the discretion of RBI. Banks decide whether to deposit money or not. Only the first statement is correct. Okay, so A, one only. Moving on, 19, time starts. SDF recently, Shabas, it replaced reverse repo rate as the floor. SDF replaced reverse repo rate. Repo still there, right in the middle. If I said something wrong, please forgive me. In a flow, I might have said, if I said SDF replace repo, that is a mistake from my part. Okay, during pre-fit, all right, no problem. Timeout, monetary transmission mechanism. So what is monetary transmission mechanism? So still getting answers. First one, the introduction of external benchmark-based lending rate was aimed at improving the transmission of monetary policy through the economy. Okay, repo rate is a better tool at regulating economy-wide money supply, while OMO helps in immediate regulation of money supply. Okay, so the answer here is both the statements are correct. C is the answer. A lot of people initially answered it correct. Some people later said B is correct. And I've got one person. No, all the answers are either C or B. So C is the correct answer. So let's look at what is monetary transmission mechanism. RBI introduces monetary policy, which is repo rate. But what is repo rate? It is a rate of interest at which RBI lends money to banks. So it's a relationship between RBI and bank. Through it, we think RBI can only adjust the money supply in the banking system. That is not true. Because when the repo rate changes, the rate of interest at which banks borrow from other places, including from the public, also raises. The rate of interest at which bank lends money to the people also increases. When RBI reduces the repo rate, all the other interest rates are also likely to go down. This is called as transmission of monetary policy to the rest of the economy. Okay, so when monetary transmission mechanism, monetary policy is transmitting properly to the economy, then RBI's policies are a success. The whole idea of repo rate is to transmit the monetary policy to the economy. When that was not happening properly, prior to 2019, the RBI, it was there in the economic survey as well, the RBI had reduced the repo rate by 135 basis points, but the banks had only reduced their lending rate by 40 basis points or something like that. That is poor monetary transmission. To overcome that, RBI said, we have a system called as marginal cost of funds based lending rate, MCLR. For certain kinds of loans, RBI replaced MCLR with EBLR, external benchmark based lending rate. MCLR was based on internal factors of the bank, like their cost of borrowing and all those things, their operational cost and all those things. External benchmark is based on the repo rate and a couple of other external factors like that. So once it is based on repo rate, when repo rate changes, external benchmark based lending rate also raises by the same extent. Repo rate falls, by the same extent, EBLR also falls. So it was aimed at improving the transmission of monetary policy through the economy. So first statement is correct. Linking the rate at which banks give loan to the common people with an external factor like repo rate was intended to improve the monetary policy, transmission of monetary policy. Second, open market operation, RBI announces next week, Friday, we are going to borrow 10,000 rupees from the market or sell G6 worth 10,000 crores from the market. Immediately, they can reduce the money supply or increase the money supply in the economy through open market operation. But most of the people who deal with securities are limited. Very few people are actually dealing with it. So commercial banks deal with it or non-banking financial companies deal with it. Very few people deal with government securities, which means that they can immediately reduce the money supply, but only from select segments of the economy, not an economy-wide change. For an economy-wide change, repo rate changes, repo rate increases, Banks lending rate increases, banks deposit rate also increases. As a result, more people deposit, common people also deposit more money into the banks. They borrow less money from the bank. So a greater economy-wide impact can be seen through repo rate. So the second statement is also correct. That's why both the statements here are correct. Okay. So hope that answer is clear. Moving to the 20th question. EBLR, MCLR is confusing. So Satish Kumar, the idea is very simple. EBLR, okay, external benchmark based lending rate, could be a typo, I think. So EBLR is very simple. So MCLR, bank looks at their internal factors. So how much, at what rate did I borrow? How much salary do I have to pay to my staff? How much is the rent on the building? All those are the factors which determine MCLR, internal factors of a bank. It is, you can also understand MCLR as internal benchmark based lending rate. But now RBI is saying, if I leave it to you to decide what is the lending rate, you are not doing it properly. You are not passing on the monetary policy properly. So we are going to do something. You decide a margin, this much more you want. You fix that margin, and after that, the interest rate will change according to repo rate. So repo rate becomes the indicator. Whatever is the repo rate plus 4% will be the lending rate. Okay, repo rate increases, lending rate also increases same way. Repo rate decreases, lending rate also decreases the same way. That is external benchmark. For a bank, repo rate is external. For a bank, their cost is internal. That is the external and internal concept over here. Satish Kumar, hope that is clear. Next question, 20. Time starts. Simple question for most people. Great, Satish. All right. So surprisingly, I'm getting a lot of wrong answers. Time out, right? So yeah, the answer here is 1 and 2. C is the correct answer over here. A lot of people seem to have missed out on this. Stagflation means stagnation accompanied by inflation. There is stagnation in the economy, there is inflation in the economy simultaneously. The Phillips curve theory, or a general theory with respect to inflation, is that inflation is likely to provide more profits. As a result, more production would happen. So when inflation happens, GDP is likely to grow, which is why India is also targeting. We need minimum 4% inflation so that our GDP rises accordingly, so that businesses produce more. But a scenario where you have high levels of inflation, but it is happening because of increasing cost of production. And the cost of production is rising, businesses are saying, sorry, we don't have money to produce more. So an inflation accompanied by a stagnation or a drop in GDP growth, or a stagnation in GDP growth, is called as stagflation. So inflation accompanied by a lack of GDP growth is correct. Skewflation, skewed inflation. In some sectors alone, there is inflation, while other sectors are largely remaining unaffected. Let's say food prices alone are rising, all other areas are remaining low. Fuel prices alone are rising, all other sectors are remaining fairly stable. That is skewflation. Skewed inflation is skewflation. So it is correctly matched. Inflation specific to only some sectors. Then you have disinflation. Disinflation is different. Deflation is different. What is the definition given there? Is deflation, decrease in the prices of goods and services. Deflation. What is disinflation? Decrease in the rate of inflation. Let's say in India, there is inflation of 8%, but we want inflation to be brought down to 4%. If we bring down the rate of inflation, it doesn't mean that the price is falling. It means that the rate of growth of the price of the commodity is falling, not the price of the commodity itself. So all the repo rate increase that the RBI is doing, when they're increasing the repo rate from 6 to 6.5 or whatever it is, those are measures to control inflation, right? Their intention is not to bring about deflation. Their intention is to bring about disinflation in the economy, reduce the rate of inflation from 6% to 4%. So disinflation is different, deflation is different. So here the answer is C, 1 and 2 only. So how is it if petrol increases, most of things, okay, with petrol, yes, if petrol price rises, most other prices will rise, but not necessarily true with respect to food items. If there is poor monsoon, food items prices will rise. It need not result in industrial products price rising also. It is not common. Qflation is not common. Usually all sectors rise together, but sometimes it may happen that one sector alone rises, the other sector doesn't rise. And also fuel price rise may not immediately result in other sector price rising. For a short while, it may be skewflation. It is possible. No, in theory, it is possible. Moving on, so 20 answer is C, 21. Time starts. Okay, so timeout. I think I have only 1 or 2 people who have given me the wrong answer. Okay, 3 now. Okay, 4 now. So except the second statement, all of the statements are correct. So second statement is wrong because customer does not have to pay. What is tokenization? When we enter our card details on websites like Amazon and all those things, we are giving our card details to Amazon itself, which is bringing a risk associated with our financial instruments like that card, debit card or credit card. Instead, if we request a tokenization, what will happen is Amazon or Flipkart, they don't maintain our detail. They take this particular customer and they take it to the bank and they say, please convert it into token form, which is a representation. The actual data is not given. A representation like an ID card, ID number is provided. So Amazon will only get to see, or Flipkart will only get to see the ID number. They don't get to see the actual information that is associated with it. So it provides protection for a customer. It refers to the replacement of actual card details with alternate code called a token. So the process is called as tokenization. It shall be unique for a combination of card token requester. Here, token requester is not us. It is the, say, Amazon or an entity like that. And the device in which we are transacting. Okay. Customer pays for the service is wrong. Customer doesn't have to pay it. If there is a payment associated, the token requester, they will do it. Customer doesn't have to pay. It is provided as a benefit to the customer itself. So B, 1 and 3 is the correct answer. Okay. Moving to 22. Time starts. Okay, we're done with the time, right? Yeah, it's quite a lengthy statement. I'll just wait for a few more seconds. All the statements are quite lengthy. All right, so we'll start. I don't expect UPSC to ask questions in this detail or depth with respect to this concept. It's a fairly new concept. The questions are likely to be more superficial, but I just asked it so that you're familiar with it in case it goes to that extent. So all your conventional questions about CBDC you would have already seen with respect to the fact that it is RBI launch a pilot program and all those things, basic thing. It is a crypto kind of a technology which is there and all those things. This is a little deeper into the concept. So RBI has launched separate digital currency for retail and wholesale segment. This itself is not very common knowledge, right? So that is correct actually. So the symbol is what I have given there. E, that rupee sign, hyphen R for retail and hyphen W for wholesale. It actually launched, RBI launched these two as two separate pilot programs. I think it launched wholesale first and then it launched retail. And there is a significant difference in how it works as well. The wholesale is actually entirely governed by the RBI itself. The entire money is a liability on the, see, all the throughout the entire thing is a liability on the RBI, but the transactions are recorded by the RBI itself. So if you are dealing with a digital rupee wholesale, it is directly with the RBI that you are dealing. You go to the RBI, you get that converted, and RBI acts like a bank in this case, which is not common. Okay, but when it comes to retail, now you would have read from a lot of places that CBDC itself means the role of bank itself will be invalid because RBI directly does it. With retail, that is not how it works. The bank is involved in this process. It is to the bank as a consumer, as a retail consumer, we go to the bank, we convert our currency to digital currency, and the bank is the one which keeps the account. With wholesale, RBI keeps the account. With retail, bank keeps the account. So the role of the bank continues to exist when it comes to CBDC retail. Now, this question was meant just to give information. All statements are correct. D is the correct answer. Okay, there is nothing, no trickery here, just to give you that information. So wholesale digital rupees, now, for now, it is limited to use in settlement of secondary market transactions in G6. That is the only place where it is used. Okay. So RBI looks at it as a mechanism to introduce their RBI is directly dealing with digital rupee wholesale, where only GSEC transactions, the entire GSEC transactions are governed by RBI itself. So it becomes easier for them. Whereas in retail, it is in the form of tokens. It represents your rupee. You give a 10 rupee note, you can convert it into a digital currency of the equivalent value. So it's completely the same as you could say our currency without there actually being a physical thing. So it's in the form of digital tokens, represent legal tender, issued in the same denominations as paper currency and coins. For most of us, we are not practically familiar with this because it's still a pilot program. But sometime in the future, it is something that we might end up using as well. Okay, just be aware of it. This is purely informative. D is the correct answer here. All three statements are correct. Okay, so we are going to have a series of questions now based on banking. So maybe I expect another 15 minutes or so should be done. Let's see. 7 questions, 15 might be a bit of a stretch, but let's see. Time starts. Okay, we are about to run out of time. All right, so the explanation itself conveys it. DBU will provide convenient access. A lot of people are very sure that B is the answer. Let's see. So DBUs will provide convenient access and enhanced digital experience in an efficient, paperless, secured, and connected environment. It's very generic in statement. The whole idea of ease of living of common citizens, digital banking units, everything about the first statement is just generic explanation of the concept. They're correct. Okay. Second statement is where the trick lies. They provide all services offered by a physical bank. So when we say that it provides a digital experience, it reduces the human involvement over there or paper trail involvement. Ask a simple question. Can they issue checkbook? They cannot issue. DBUs cannot issue a checkbook. What DBU can do? In a DBU, you can raise a request for a checkbook, but the issue of the checkbook is not done there. It will be given by the physical bank. It will be sent to your home address. Okay. Or you can go to the branch office and collect it. A lot of activities you can do for now. Some activities you cannot do. You actually have to go to a physical bank. The idea is for all those activities where you don't require a physical bank, this is an alternative that is given. Lesser investment for the bank also because manpower requirement is lesser, more easy access for common people also. So they don't provide all services offered by a physical bank, but they do provide a lot of services that are provided by a physical bank, which need not be in physical form. So second statement is wrong. Now the third question, all the scheduled commercial banks, oh, I should have mentioned it as scheduled commercial banks. I cannot use a direct short form just like that. Okay, all the scheduled commercial banks other than RRBs, payment banks and local area banks can set up DBUs. It's correct, it's factual, it's from the RBI website. So 1 and 3 are correct. D is the correct answer here. Second statement is wrong because they don't provide all the facilities or all the services. Moving on to 24. Time starts. You're done with the time. Now we are. Okay. So someone said D and then said sorry A. So let's look at the statements. Payment aggregator. So this is where sometimes your digital banking payment aggregation could be sometimes confusing. Similar kind of, these are areas where I have got questions saying what is the difference between these two. So digital banking units means SBI. SBI itself has a digital banking unit, something which represents SBI itself. You can actually go there. Basic infrastructure would be there. It is doesn't digital banking unit doesn't mean that doesn't physically exist. It doesn't have physical manpower over there, just like a kiosk that you have, like an ATM or something like that, where you can go and do certain activities. It doesn't. It has very limited physical presence, but it is still physically there are entities which are set up. But payment aggregator is a different concept altogether. So payment aggregator means, so when you go to a platform, let's say you go to Flipkart and you buy a commodity, when the transaction is happening, who provides the bank transactions and all those things? Who's providing that web page where you can do all the transactions? So you would have come across this term called as Razor Pay or MobiQuicken. There are different terms that you may have come across. So they are what we call as payment aggregators. Okay, they provide the service of completing financial transactions on behalf of, say, Amazon or Flipkart or any other store, say anyone else who has an online store. So not just online, it could be actual physical stores as well. You have your point of sale machines. Who's providing your QR codes? They are all payment aggregators. Whoever is providing those QR codes and enabling those transactions, that is what is called as payment aggregators. They're entities that facilitate e-commerce sites and merchants to accept various payment instruments from customers for a completion of, not PF, of their payment obligations. Correct. They eliminate the need for merchants to create a separate payment integration system of their own. If payment aggregators don't exist, let's say I own a store, I have to put in all the infrastructure necessary for creating a payment system of my own. That is not necessary because they take care of all the infrastructure that is there. Okay. And then finally, banks as well as non-bank PAs require a separate authorization from RBI. This is where there is an error. So the third statement is wrong. Answer is A, 1 and 2 only. Non-bank payment aggregators require a separate authorization. But banks are already a part of the payment and settlement system of RBI. They don't need a separate. They already have the license of being payment aggregators. It is only non-bank PAs which require a separate authorization from RBI as a part of payments and settlement system. Previously, only banks were allowed to do payment and settlement activities. Now, non-bank entities are also given the permission to do that. So the third statement is wrong because banks don't require a separate authorization. Only non-bank PAs require that. So answer is A, 1 and 2. Moving on. UPI Pay Now linkage. Timer started. Arindita, if you could mention the question that you are referring to, it would be easier for me to give you an answer. Somewhere skipped. Okay. 23. I'll get back to it after this question. We are on 25 now. All right. So we are, this is merely an informative question. So both the statements here are correct. C is the answer. Both the statements are correct. So this was, in a way, a landmark event because it's happening for the first time. The second statement is correct. Singapore is the first country with which India has launched cross-border person-to-person payment facilities. Fast payment system of the two countries is what is being linked. The linkage is a project between RBI and Monetary Authority of Singapore to link the payment system, fast payment systems. India has UPI, which is fast payment system. Similarly, Singapore has a mechanism called as Pay Now. The link between UPI and Pay Now, where you can now transact from UPI to Pay Now. There is a linkage. So we can easily send money from India to Singapore or Singapore to India. And India has a lot of expat population in Singapore. Okay, so that is why this becomes, or this gains prominence. Transactions between the countries now become faster and much more efficient. Okay, so 25, the answer is both the statements. 25C, both 1 and 2. Okay, so previously someone had asked a question about 23. So 23, the answer is D, 1 and 3. Second statement is wrong because it doesn't provide all the services offered by a physical bank. That's the error there. Okay. 26 now. Time starts. Tamil at a later point. I can. Maybe at the end, if you can stay back, then maybe. All right. I'm done. Okay, Financial Services Institutions Bureau. As the first statement itself says, previously we had Bank Both Bureau, but the issue with Bank Both Bureau is that based on certain controversies and issues that came up, the appointments made by Bank Both Bureau has raised a lot of questions. Sometimes some seniors have been bypassed and without proper explanation. So question marks have been raised on the functioning of Bank Both Bureau. So it necessitated the government to introduce a replacement body, which is the Financial Services Institutions Bureau. So it is a replacement of BBB. And what was BBB's main mandate? To make recommendations towards filling critical posts. Okay. So that is the first statement is correct in that sense. Okay. So second one, the Bureau will also be involved in formulating and developing business strategies for state-run banks and help them in their fundraising plans. It's just explanation. That's correct. It would also monitor and assess the performance of public sector banks, government-owned financial institutions, and insurance companies, not just banks, because previously it was Bank Both Bureau. Now it also includes other government-owned financial institutions and insurance companies also. So that is an addition that is there. So if the first statement you would assume to be true because insurance or other financial institutions are involved, then the third also has to be correct. So in this context, all the three statements are correct, merely informative in nature. So all three statements are correct. Just do read up a little more about how the members are appointed themselves. But right now, that may not be as important. Just know what is the role of FSIB. But if you can read up a little more about it, it could be useful for you. Okay, so that was 26. Answer is D. Okay, moving to the last four questions, 27 now. The time starts. I see a raised hand by DJ. If you could send me a text. Okay, so you're done. Most people have got the answer right. Almost everyone who has answered. So the answer here is C. Again, merely explanatory in nature. SEBI has approved SSE. It's a stock exchange. So SEBI will have a key role to play in this. Has approved SSE for the purpose of fundraising by social enterprises. It's there in the name itself, right? Social enterprises eligible to participate in SSE should be entities having social intent and impact as their primary goal. See, now uh, both the statements are correct. See, both 1 and 2 are correct, explanatory in nature. The idea is this. If you are working as a company who doesn't have profit as your primary motive, so it is applicable for non-profit organizations also, even profit-oriented organizations, but profit is not the key motive. Okay. When you are a company where profit is not the key motive, you might find it extremely difficult to raise money from the conventional share market, because anyone who goes to the conventional share market is thinking, okay, dividend or profit, I will get a share of the profit in the form of dividend. So that is the logic of investing in shares. Now, they might find it difficult to raise money from there. So the government has thought of this concept. In the budget, it was announced a year or so ago, year or two ago, that a special stock exchange where the moment anyone who goes there, they know that profit is not the key motive. There are a lot of people who might be interested in investing towards socially relevant purposes, but they don't have huge amounts of money to invest. The whole idea of stock market is small amounts of money can be invested there, right? So from multiple sources, huge sources. So such companies, to raise money from people who are not only working on profit motive, who want to invest in socially small amounts, but in socially relevant activities. For them, a separate social stock exchange called a social stock exchange is to be used. But there are restrictions on the companies which are raising money from here, because they cannot raise money from here and use it for whatever purpose that they want. Okay, they have to show to the concerned organization that they are using the money in the right way as well. There are certain guidelines that are associated with it as well. But this is the general idea of what is a social stock exchange. Both the statements are correct. Okay, there's 3 more questions. Sit tight. Almost there. Time starts. Technical textiles. I'll answer that before I explain this one. All right. So, what are technical textiles? Let me look at the answers. Okay. All right. So a lot of people saying C, some people saying D, but most answers are C. All right. So there is a general logic by which you can eliminate one statement, and that will help you arrive at the answer itself. The one statement is the first statement. Technical textiles account for nearly 80% of India's total textile and apparel market. If you have a general idea of what is technical textile, it is textile itself, but used for your non-conventional purposes, or textiles of a particular type. Okay, it has wide variety of uses. So textiles made of, let's say, jute or certain types of, you can't quite call it as plastic, but similar kind of compounds that are there. So that is what is the whole idea of technical textiles. Okay, so it has application in manufacturing parachutes or sports appliances, even defense appliances, your bulletproof vests. All these can be created out of technical textiles. Okay, tents can be created out of technical textiles. So that is the whole idea. 80% of India's textile market is technical textile. You should have been hearing about technical textile for a very long period of time. It is an evolving area. Evolving area cannot already have 80%. That's a logic that you can apply. You eliminate one, you're left with only one answer. C is the correct answer. First statement is wrong. It is not 80%. It currently accounts for a much, much smaller proportion of it. If I forget the exact number that is there, So I'll let you know. Meanwhile, the second and the third statements are correct. So they are very generic in nature. Also, before I forget, there are a couple of queries which came about the previous question. I'll come back. I am yet to tell you how much does it account for. Bharat is asking, does SSC come under the purview of FCRA? Unfortunately, I don't know yet. With respect to FCRA, I don't know, first of all, whether regulations have been put in place with respect to foreign contributions or not. Is there any particular reason why you asked this question? Is there a context to it? Please let me know. Then Arvind is asking, will it be effective as it has no returns? No, we can't say it has no returns. Even a company which doesn't work with profit as motive may make certain profits. And sometimes philanthropic measures, for example, let's say you are an extremely rich person. You can go and run some charitable organization like Akshaya Patra or such non-profit organization. What if you don't have that much money, but out of your salary, you believe that you want to contribute something towards charitable organizations? So instead of randomly giving in, and the problem with respect to giving money to charitable organizations sometimes is you don't know whether they're actually using it for charity. This is where the government provides an opportunity saying, if you want to be sure, and the government is saying that we are regulating it properly, we'll ensure that the money is used for charitable purposes or socially relevant purposes, not just charity, socially relevant purposes. So rather than giving it to some random organization, why don't you come and put the money over here? Small amounts of money. That is where it is expected to raise money from those people who are putting their money with profit as not the motive over there. So it can raise money in that sense. Okay. So that is the answer to it. Bharat, please let me know if there is a context to it, to your question. Okay. So I told you that with respect to technical textiles, I'll let you know what is the contribution. It contributes roughly around 10% of India's total textile and apparel market. Okay. So that is the number, not 80%. The exact number is 13%, but roughly 10%. If you can remember it that way, that would be sufficient. So that is the error with the first statement. Okay. So there is this website called as Invest India, which all of you might be familiar with, or some of you might be familiar with. I do sometimes use it in class if it's relevant. So this is the website, Invest India. So this website has information on technical textiles because of the focus that is given there. So this is the website. This gives you a lot of information about FDI and all investments into India and all those things. Investindia.gov.in. But more specifically, you can search just technical textiles, and the best source of information that you have is from this website, the future of textiles, technical textiles. Important because the Prime Minister himself made a lot of comments about this, and a lot of key government comments have been about focusing on technical textiles. So it has an overview, where are the various segments where it is used from a science and tech perspective itself. These are the main segments and applications where it can be used. So becomes very important. Just read up generally about this. The numbers, rate of growth and all those may not be as important, more from a science and tech perspective than from an economic perspective. Okay. All right. So moving on to 29th question. Just two more. Time has started. Okay, done. So let me look at the answers. So B is the dominant answer. B is 2 only. Okay, let's take a look at it. Scheme for promotion of bulk drug parks, under which the Ministry of Ayush claims aims to support the setting up of. First of all, if you are familiar with what is bulk drug, the generic drugs that are manufactured, what does that have to do with the Ministry of Ayush? Ministry of Ayush is about your indigenous medical systems, right? So it is the Department of Pharmaceuticals, Ministry of Pharmaceuticals, which is involved in this, not the Ministry of Ayush. That is where the first statement is wrong. Everything else about it is correct. 3,000 crore is set up. 3 drug parks were proposed to be set up as per the budget. Recently, the approval has been given to 3 states for setting up drug parks over there. 3,000 crore is the outlay. 1,000 crore per drug park, bulk drug park. Scheme intends to reduce India's high dependence on imports for manufacturing bulk drugs. So during COVID, there was this problem. India is a big, huge pharmaceutical. So we can pharmacy of the world, we are defined as, but we are dependent on Chinese imports for active pharmaceutical ingredients, API. We do produce a lot, but we are also dependent on imports from there. To reduce the import dependence and to make India truly Atmanirbhar in the context of pharmaceuticals is why this particular scheme was launched. So the second statement is correct. The first statement is wrong because it's not the Ministry of Ayush, Pharmaceuticals Ministry, or the Department of Pharmaceuticals is the one which is involved in this. B2 only is the correct answer. Okay. So meanwhile, to answer a previous question, Bharat, Bharat's question was whether firms in social stock exchange have to be registered under FCRA. It's a good question to know because I can give you some extra information. SSE does not allow foreign investments as of now. So foreigners are not, foreign portfolio investments or that kind of investment is not allowed in social stock exchange. So the question of FCRA doesn't even come into the picture. I hope that answers your question. Moving to the last question that we have. Time starts. Welcome, Bharat. Okay, we are out of time. So 29th, I told you the answer is 2 only. Earlier, someone asked me about 29th answer, 2 only. Okay, 30th. 30th, again, a very general kind of informative kind of statement. The answer is D, 1, 2, and 3. The answer for 30 is D, 1, 2, and 3. Let's look at the statements one by one. ONDC is an initiative aiming at promoting open networks for all aspects of exchange of goods and services over digital or electronic networks. It will enable local commerce across segments such as mobility, grocery, food delivery, and travel to be discovered and engaged by any network-enabled application. Network-enabled application being the important one. It is an initiative of DPIIT. It's correct. It is not actually actively run by them, but it's an initiative of that department. There's no doubt about it. First of all, what is Open Network for Digital Commerce? ONDC. The idea is that we have, let's say, something like, again, I'm taking the similar kind of examples, Amazon or Flipkart. Okay. Let's say I have an account in Amazon and there are some sellers who are registered on Amazon. When I want to buy a particular product, I want to buy a mobile phone, I can buy only from those sellers who are registered on Amazon. So it's only, my options are limited to that. There may be so many other sellers of the same mobile phone or some other object that I'm buying to buy who are not registered on Amazon, who are registered on some other website. Let's say Flipkart. Let's say some other local, other e-commerce platform, if there is any that is there. Or there is no e-commerce platform itself. There is some other seller who's not registered on an e-commerce platform. My options are restricted to those entities who are registered on the Amazon network alone. Similarly, for a seller also, they have to be registered with Amazon to sell on Amazon. They have to be registered separately with Flipkart to sell on Flipkart, or they have to be separately registered with some other entity to sell there. So they need individual registrations everywhere. Otherwise, there might be some customer who says most of my products I'm buying from Flipkart. I don't even have an account in Amazon, which means a producer who's registered or a seller who's registered on Amazon is missing out on a customer who's not registered on Amazon. So this is a problem. Narrows down the buyers and sellers, the contact between buyers and sellers. So the government came up with an initiative where they said we are going to create something called as an open network for digital commerce, where whoever is the interested seller can come and register there. Okay, whoever is, see, even someone like something like an Amazon or Flipkart can go and register themselves with ONDC, and a seller who's interested can go and register themselves there, which means that now if you access it through the open network for digital commerce, any seller who's registered or any network enabled application, network here is open network, right? Network enabled application, anyone can access, any seller can access any buyer can access any seller. It need not be app specific. Okay, which is why it is called as open network. So that is the whole idea of it. Two, you can say democratize the whole e-commerce segment is the whole idea behind the concept of open network for digital commerce. Okay, there's a very interesting 5-minute video or 7-minute video about explaining the concept of ONDC, which you can download from their official website itself. So ONDC, just type ONDC, it will give you a very good overview of their official website, Open Network for Digital Commerce. There is a video which is given. Where is the video? No more. I don't know, must be somewhere here, maybe about, or maybe you click on home. There is a 7-minute video I randomly popped up. I think somewhere you click, you will get the video. I'm not able to. It's not still very user friendly. I think learn about ONDC opens up that video, I think. I'm not sure, but there is a video here. I'm sure about that. So this is a source from where you can access it. Okay. So that brings us to an end of the 30 questions that I have. Yeah. So to democratize online, correct. Karthik, thank you for that. That brings us to an end of the questions that I have had in mind. So if there is something else that you would like to ask, you are free to ask away. Meanwhile, there is a question earlier asked about UPI 123. I'm looking for who asked, just to address the person. Okay, Tamil asked me, can I explain UPI 123 pay? So the idea is for us to use UPI now, we need a smartphone with internet connection and all those, right? How about UPI for people who do not have an internet mobile phone, who have a featured phone, like our previous 1100 kind of phones? So UPI 123 pay is an option by which they have a few alternatives. They can type an IVR code, or they can call and make transactions by giving a certain code. That facility is called as, in general terms, that is what is called as UPI 123 pay. For feature phone users, how to use UPI. Okay, so hope that answers your question, Tamil. How to cover economic surveys wisely? I think at this point, you shouldn't focus on economic survey too much. Just focus on certain areas, certain tables. Look at previous year UPC questions. What are the trends? Like I took up today, right? Trends, data, table, patterns. That is what you should focus on. For mains, economic survey becomes even more important. Okay. From a mains perspective, you can take some information with respect to schemes and all those things from there, and that is what you can. That is how you can use that. Okay, economic survey from prelims perspective. Just now, if you go and start reading everything, it is a little too time consuming in nature. I don't know how to share any communication mechanism. Can you write to Shankar Academy and ask for my information? My mail ID will be shared by them. You can find Shankar Academy's communication, because this video I think is shared on YouTube as well. So I don't want to give any communication mechanism with such an open platform. Just write to. If you have my mail ID, you can write to me. I'll respond to that. If you have been a past student, or just write to Shankar Academy. They will find some communication there. I will make sure that I'll ask them to reply individually to you on mail, giving my email ID. Then we'll communicate. Okay. I hope you understand my hesitation to share on an open platform any communication mechanism. So Anyway, so Satish Kumar, can I explain zero coupon bonds? Can we say T-bills and CMB as zero coupon bonds? Yes, we can call it as zero coupon bonds. Zero coupon bonds means bonds which have zero interest rate, because your T-bills and cash management bills do not work on the concept of interest rate. They work on the concept of issued at discount and redeemed at par. So how T-bill works is, government issues a T-bill and says, 91 days later, I'll give you 1,000 rupees. They tell you how much they'll give you. So what is the gain that you have? Government says, okay, I want minimum 900 rupees. I'll give you 1,000 rupees after 3 months. Minimum, I want 900 rupees. Now auction starts to buy the T-bill. Someone says, I'll give you 910. Someone says, I'll give you 920. Someone says, I'll give you 930. Finally, it is settled for 950. So the government gets 950. They'll give you 1,000. So there is no interest rate. The gap between 1,000 and 950 is what is your gain. So that is what is called as zero coupon bonds. Okay. Bond yield and inversely proportional to bond price. Please explain whether bond here denotes both G6 and T-bills. Bond here denotes primarily G6 because T-bills are short term, but everything is a bond. So dated G6 is what is usually referred to in this case. Mithilesh, are you a student of Shankar Academy? Do you have any contact information of mine? If so, drop a text so that I can explain to you. In fact, I think I have explained the link between bond yield and in one of the videos that's there on YouTube as well. Okay. A couple of questions have come. I think maybe I'll answer it now itself. Bond yield and bond price. I'll explain the relationship. Welcome, Priyadarshini, Dev, SAS. Welcome. Is there any zero coupon bond other than T-bills and CMB? I think commercial papers and are also zero coupon bonds, if I'm not wrong. So those are government securities, but private securities can be zero coupon bonds also. Yeah, Mithilesh, actually stay back because I think other people, a couple of others are also asking. So I think I'll explain bond yield and bond relationship between bond yield and bond price now itself. Welcome, Aravind. Meena Priya, what is crowding effect? So there is nothing called as crowding effect. It is either crowding in effect or crowding out effect, if you're asking in the context of government expenditure. So the idea is simple. If the government were to increase their expenditure, government increases their expenditure, generally capital expenditure, government increases their capital expenditure. If it results in more and more investments coming in, private investments coming in, it is called as crowding in effect. Because government is building roads and infrastructure, other investments are coming in. Okay. If the government were to increase their expenditure, as a result of that increase, the private investors are either looking at the government as competition, or the private investors see government to spend money, they have to borrow, right? When they borrow, the interest rate tends to go up because government is borrowing, others are also borrowing, demand for money is increasing. So government borrowing means private investors will now find borrowing costlier. As a result, they may not borrow. So if the government increases expenditure, as a result, private investors go away. That is called as crowding out effect. So there is crowding in and crowding out effect. Crowding in means government investment is resulting in more investment. Crowding out means government investment is resulting in investments reducing, private investments reducing. So hope that clarifies it. Okay, so crowding effect I have answered. So what bond price and bond yield, the idea is this. This is primarily in the secondary market, okay, not in the primary market. Satish, I'll answer that, but let me finish this one. So this is in the secondary market, okay. So there is, imagine that there is a bond. Government issues a bond and borrows 1,000 rupees. Government says they'll pay 8% in return. First year, 5-year bond, okay, 8% is the return. So 80 rupees is what the person will get at the end of year. Every year, the person will get 80 rupees. Second year, let us say there is inflation. When there is inflation, interest rates in the economy also go up. Okay. So now in the second year, when the government is trying to borrow money, it is issuing a new bond. It has to offer a higher interest rate because of inflation. The interest rates have gone up. So it has to offer higher interest rate. So the government is offering 10% as the interest rate on it instead of 8%. The government in the second year borrows 1,000 rupees, but is offering 10% as the interest. Okay. So there are two government bonds now, first bond and second bond. First bond has 8% in return. Second bond has 10% in return. First bond offers 80 rupees on 1000 rupees. Second bond offers 100 rupees on 1000 rupees. Okay. Now, the person who bought the first bond, in the second year, when the person is trying to sell it, no one is buying the bond. Why is no one buying the bond? Because there is already a bond which is offering much greater than the first bond. So why would anyone buy the first bond? So what will the first person do? The first person will be forced to sell the bond at a lesser price because the person cannot alter the interest rate. The person, what they can do is they can sell their bond at a lesser price. Let us say they sell it at 20 rupees lesser than usual. So they bought the bond at 1,000 rupees. They are now willing to sell it at 980 rupees, which is a loss for them. Why are they doing it? Because they need immediate cash. Otherwise, no one would do it. They need immediate cash, so they are willing to sell it at even 980 rupees. When it is sold at 980 rupees, the 1,000 rupee bond will still fetch 80 rupees. So 980 rupees will fetch 1,080 rupees. So 980 rupees will fetch 100 rupees on top of it. Whereas there is another bond which fetches 100 rupees on 1,000 rupees. This first bond is now fetching 100 rupees on 980 rupees. Okay. So the bond price has gone down. The yield of the bond, which was previously 8%, is now more than 8%. 100 rupees on 980 is more than 8%. When the bond price goes down, the rate of yield or the yield goes up. So this is the inverse relationship between bond price and bond yield. Okay. It is better explained if I could write it, but then that will take a lot of time. It is a bigger explanation. If you can communicate with me, just find my email ID or write to Shankar Academy. So I will get the information, or you will be shared my mail ID. Then I can share the written explanation of this. I have a written explanation with me. I can do that for you. All right. So if you want a further explanation of bond price and bond yield, if not, go to RBI's website. So I'll show you. To understand the relation between bond price and bond yield itself, I'll show you a very good source. Just type G6 RBI FAQ. Okay, so there is an FAQ on government securities that RBI has. Here you will find a discussion on yield. Where are you, yield? Or is it not this one? I think this is the one. Yeah, here it is. How is yield? Yield-based auction. Question number 4. Price-based auction. Wasn't there another one? Wait. No, maybe not this one. So this is, yeah. What are the basic mathematical concepts one should know for calculation involving bond prices and yields? It is very complicated, probably. So you can take a look at it, but if you find it difficult to understand, okay, what is the relationship between yield and price of a bond? How is yield of a bond calculated? So an illustration is provided. Okay, so this should help you if you are not able to communicate with me. Else, communicate with me, find a way. Shankar Academy, through that, come to me. I'll help you out. All right. Welcome, Mithilesh. Rajeshri is asking, how does repo rate affect bond yield and rate? When there is inflation, repo rate increases. When the repo rate increases, logically, bond yield also has to increase. If the government is trying to borrow money, if the repo rate is high, they'll have to offer higher rates as well. So bond yield tends to go up as well, at least in the primary segment. Bond yield tends to rise along with repo, is what is the general understanding, but you'll have to be very specific in which direction we are talking. Inflation adjusted bonds, this scenario will be insignificant, right? Inflation adjusted bonds, yes, to a large extent insignificant, but inflation adjusted bonds forms a very small part of overall government borrowing. So it is not significant enough for us to say that that is a big factor. Okay, 9th question, option A, is it for all state owned taxes revenue is a major? No, not for every individual state. Not for every individual state. So we have, I had downloaded that page, right? So take a look at this. Not for every single state that is there, but for all states put together. All the states put together, the money that they receive. Here it is. So this is for all states and UTs with their own legislature, not for every single state. Satish, hope that answers the question. Cumulatively for all states is what you're talking about. I hope there is no unanswered question. So I think we'll wind up the session with this. Hope you had a informative session. 16th question: due to internationalization of rupee, will rupee appreciate and exports decrease, so exchange rate will be affected? See, for rupee to appreciate, exports decrease. Srinath, are you a student of SIA? Do you happen to have my mail ID? Bangalore PCM batch. You have my mail ID then, right? Just contact the Bangalore office and they'll give you my email ID or my Telegram ID. Tell them that I told you to share the Telegram ID, not the number. Please don't ask for number. Telegram ID. Or just my mail ID. You ask them for my mail ID. We can interact. Okay, so 16th question: due to internationalization, will rupee appreciate and exports decrease, so exchange rate will be affected? Did I say that exchange rate will be unaffected? Why do you ask this question? 16th question. It is a process that involves, okay, it is a process, it increases the exchange rate risk, is the part that I think you might have a question with. Due to internationalization of rupee, will rupee appreciate? No, why would rupee appreciate? Because greater demand for rupee, okay. But appreciate with respect to which currency? Appreciation is a concept with respect to two currencies, right? With which currency are you talking about? You are still talking about the internationalization of rupee and talking about transacting in dollars. Your transaction itself is in rupee, right? So where is this concept coming? Which appreciation with respect to what currency? That is a question that is raised now, right? So rupee in the global scenario gets appreciated, no doubt about it. Also, exports may reduce, exchange rate may be affected, exchange rate will stabilize, it may have some benefits, there may be some disadvantages. For example, developed countries, they find it hard to export. USA has a trade deficit with a lot of countries, all that is true. So in the long run, maybe it is possible that it can have some impact. To say that it increases the exchange rate risk on domestic traders is highly, no, it's very drastic to claim that. Okay, so hope that gives you some clarity on that. All right, so I think we have gone way overboard. We started a little late, but still considering that also, we have gone at least half an hour overboard. So we'll wind up the session with this. Thank you so much. See you in class or some other time.